The Valori Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 900 star systems. Billions of beings lived under their control. Some served them willingly, most did not have a choice. High Arbiter Thesson stood at the center of the Imperial command chamber on Valori Prime. Massive screens surrounded him, showing reports from every corner of the empire. He was tall for his species, with pale blue skin and 4 eyes that never seemed to blink. Gold robes hung from his thin shoulders. A crown of black metal sat upon his head. He was the most powerful being in the known galaxy. He had held this position for 300 years. In all that time, nothing had truly surprised him. Until today, a junior officer approached him with shaking hands. The young Valori's scales had turned gray with fear. This was not a good sign. "High Arbiter," the officer said. His voice trembled. "We have received an urgent transmission from the Frontier Fleet." Thesson turned slowly. His 4 eyes focused on the officer. "What kind of transmission?" "An anomaly, High Arbiter. An unidentified vessel has crossed into Dominion space." Thesson almost laughed. Ships crossed into their space all the time. Pirates, smugglers, lost traders. The Frontier Fleet destroyed them without mercy. This was routine. "Why does this require my attention?" Thesson asked. The officer swallowed hard. "Because the vessel survived, High Arbiter." The chamber went silent. Every officer stopped their work. Every screen seemed to dim. Thesson felt something he had not felt in centuries. He felt uncertain. "Show me," he commanded. The main screen flickered to life. It showed the darkness of space at the edge of Dominion territory. Stars glittered in the distance. Then the camera focused on something else. A ship. It was small. Thesson had seen larger transport shuttles. The design was crude and angular, nothing like the smooth curves of Valori vessels. The hull was covered in strange markings and patches of different metals. It looked like it had been repaired 1,000 times. "What species built this?" Thesson demanded. "Unknown, High Arbiter. It matches nothing in our databases. The design is primitive." Thesson watched as the Frontier Fleet moved into position. 20 warships surrounded the strange vessel. Each warship was a kilometer long, bristling with plasma cannons and missile bays. They could destroy a small moon in minutes. The small ship did not change course. It did not speed up or slow down. It simply continued forward, as if the warships did not exist. "They sent hailing signals," the officer explained. The vessel did not respond. "They sent warning shots." The vessel did not respond. Then what? Then Fleet Commander Yorith ordered a full attack. The recording continued. Thesson watched as all 20 warships opened fire at once. Plasma beams lit up the darkness. Missiles streaked through space. The amount of firepower was enough to crack a planet's crust. The small ship flew straight into the storm of destruction, and it emerged on the other side without a scratch. Thesson's blood turned cold. He stepped closer to the screen, as if getting nearer would help him understand what he was seeing. The strange vessel had absorbed an attack that should have vaporized it completely. Its hull did not even glow from the heat. "Impossible," someone whispered behind him. The small ship continued forward. It passed through the formation of warships like they were nothing. Then something strange happened. The vessel began to glow with a soft blue light. Space seemed to bend around it, and then it vanished. "Hyperspace jump," the officer said. "But High Arbiter, the energy signature was unlike anything we have ever recorded. Our scientists say it should not be possible." Thesson stood frozen. His mind raced through possibilities. A new species with superior technology? A weapon from a rival empire? Some kind of natural phenomenon? None of these explanations felt right. "There is more, High Arbiter," the officer continued. "Before the vessel jumped, it sent a transmission." "What did it say?" "We do not know yet. The language is not in our databases. Our archivists are working on translation now." Thesson turned away from the screen. He walked to his command throne and sat down heavily. For the first time in 300 years, he felt the weight of his position crushing him. "Find that ship," he ordered. "Send every available fleet to search the frontier. I want to know where it came from, who built it, and what it wants." The officers scrambled to obey. Messages went out across the empire. Ships changed course. Soldiers prepared for deployment. The great machine of the Valori Dominion began to move, but deep in his heart, Thesson felt a strange fear. The small ship had not attacked. It had not threatened. It had simply survived and left. That was somehow more terrifying than any battle. Hours passed. Thesson remained in his command throne, watching reports come in from across the Empire. The mysterious vessel had not been found. It was as if it had disappeared completely. Then the archivists arrived. There were 3 of them. Old Vialori who had spent their lives studying ancient texts and dead languages. Their robes were dusty and their eyes were tired. But there was something else in their expressions, something that looked like fear. The lead archivist bowed low before the throne. "High Arbiter, we have translated the message. Speak." The archivist hesitated. His hands trembled as he held up a data tablet. "The language is very old. We found it in records from over 3,000 years ago. Records that were sealed by order of the Imperial Council." Thesson leaned forward. "What records?" "Records of the Purge, High Arbiter." The word hung in the air like poison. Thesson felt his heart stop for a moment. The Purge. It was a word that was never spoken. A chapter of history that had been erased from all public records. Only the highest members of the Dominion knew what it meant. 3,000 years ago, the Vialori had discovered a small planet on the edge of the galaxy. It was called Earth by its inhabitants. The species that lived there called themselves humans. At first, the Vialori had been amused by them. Humans were primitive creatures. They had barely developed space travel. They fought among themselves constantly. They seemed weak and divided, but the Vialori scientists who studied them grew concerned. Humans were adaptive. They learned quickly. They were creative in ways that other species were not. They had a strange fire in their spirits that made them unpredictable. The scientists presented their findings to the Imperial Council. Humans were dangerous, they said. Not now, but soon. If allowed to develop, they could become a threat to Vialori dominance. The Council debated for years. Some argued for diplomacy. Others wanted to enslave the humans like other species. But in the end, fear won. The decision was made. The humans would be eliminated. The purge lasted only a few months. The Vialori fleet surrounded the human solar system. They bombarded Earth from orbit until the oceans boiled. They destroyed every colony, every station, every ship. 8 billion humans died in fire and darkness, or so the records claimed. The archivist's voice brought Thesson back to the present. The message from the vessel was in the human language, High Arbiter, a language that should be extinct. What did it say? Thesson demanded. The archivist looked down at his tablet. His voice was barely a whisper when he read the words. "We remember what you did to Earth." The chamber fell into absolute silence. Thesson gripped the arms of his throne so hard that the metal bent under his fingers. His 4 eyes were wide with something that no one had ever seen in him before. Pure terror. "That is impossible," he said. "The humans were destroyed. Every single one of them. Our ancestors made certain of it. The records say they were thorough," the archivist agreed. "But High Arbiter, someone sent this message. Someone who knows the human language. Someone who knows what we did 3,000 years ago." Thesson stood up suddenly. His robes swirled around him. His mind was spinning with horrible possibilities. "Search every archive," he commanded. "Every sealed record. Every classified document. I want to know if any humans escaped the purge. I want to know everything about their technology, their culture, their history, and I want to know now." The archivists bowed and hurried away. Thesson turned back to the main screen. The image of the strange vessel was still displayed there. He stared at it for a long time. The ship was small and crude. It looked like it should fall apart at any moment, but it had survived an attack that would destroy most warships. It had technology that the Dominion could not understand, and it carried a message of remembrance from a species that should be extinct. Thesson had been alive for over 400 years. He had seen wars and plagues and disasters of every kind. He had crushed rebellions and conquered worlds. Nothing had ever truly frightened him. But now, standing alone in his command chamber, he felt a cold dread spreading through his body. The humans remembered, and they had returned. In the days that followed, the Dominion searched desperately for answers. Archivists dug through ancient records that had been sealed for millennia. Scientists studied the energy readings from the mysterious vessel. Military commanders repositioned their fleets to cover key systems, but the answers they found only raised more questions. The records of the purge were incomplete. Entire sections had been deleted or corrupted, but one document mentioned something troubling. A colony ship had been detected leaving the human solar system just before the final bombardment. The ship had been pursued, but it had used an experimental drive system that the Valori could not track. The colony ship was never found. It was assumed to have been destroyed in the void between stars. Now Thesson wondered if that assumption had been wrong. He called a meeting of the Imperial Council. The 12 most powerful Valori in the galaxy gathered in a sealed chamber deep beneath the palace. They were old and wise, each one having ruled for centuries. They had guided the Dominion through countless challenges, but when Thesson told them about the vessel and its message, he saw fear in their eyes too. "This must be a trick," said Counselor Maith. "Some other species has found human artifacts. They are using them to frighten us." "For what purpose?" asked Counselor Dren. "No species would dare challenge the Dominion." "Perhaps not openly," said Counselor Vex. "But there are many who hate us. Many who would enjoy seeing us afraid." Thesson shook his head. "The technology that ship displayed is beyond anything in the galaxy. No known species possesses it. And the message, it was not a threat. It was a statement, a reminder." "Then what do you suggest?" Maith demanded. "We prepare for the worst," Thesson said. "We increase military production. We strengthen our defenses. We hunt for this vessel and any others like it. And we wait. Wait for what?" Thesson looked at each council member in turn. His 4 eyes were hard and cold. "Wait to see what the ghosts of Earth want from us." The council approved his recommendations. Orders went out across the Empire. Factories began producing weapons at maximum capacity. Fleets moved to strategic positions. Soldiers trained for battles they could not imagine. And through it all, the mysterious vessel remained hidden. Days turned into weeks. The Dominion's sensors searched every corner of their space. They found nothing. Some began to hope that the vessel had simply passed through and would never return. Thesson knew better. He spent long hours alone in his chambers, studying everything the archivists had recovered about humans. He read their history, their literature, their philosophy. He watched recordings of their culture before the purge. What he learned disturbed him. Humans were not like other species. They did not give up. They did not accept defeat. Time and again throughout their history, they had faced impossible challenges and found ways to survive. They were stubborn, creative, and endlessly adaptable. They had crossed oceans in ships made of wood. They had built machines that could fly. They had walked on their moon and sent probes to distant planets. All of this in just a few thousand years of civilization. And now, if the records were correct, some of them had escaped into the void between galaxies. They had survived there for 3,000 years. What had they become in that time? What had they learned? Thesson stood at his window, looking out at the capital city of Valori Prime. Millions of his people lived below, going about their daily lives. They did not know about the vessel. They did not know about the message. They did not know that somewhere out in the darkness, something was watching, something that remembered. The High Arbiter closed his 4 eyes and tried to imagine what the humans were planning. Were they coming for revenge? Were they preparing an invasion? Or was this just the beginning of something far more subtle and dangerous? He did not know. And that uncertainty was the worst part. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Valori Dominion was not in control, and somewhere in the depths of space, a small, battered ship waited. Its pilot was patient. She had waited 3,000 years for this moment. She could wait a little longer. The galaxy was about to remember a truth that had been buried for millennia. The humans were not extinct. They had been watching. And now, they had returned. Korath Station was the largest military outpost in the outer territories of the Valori Dominion. It floated in orbit around a gas giant, a massive structure of metal and weapons that served as home to 50,000 soldiers and crew. From here, the Dominion controlled traffic through 6 different star systems. It was a symbol of their power. Commander Zell stood on the main observation deck, watching cargo ships pass through the security checkpoints. She was a veteran of 40 years of service. Her blue scales had faded with age, and scars marked her face from battles long past. Nothing surprised her anymore, or so she thought. The alarm started at midday. Red lights flashed across every corridor. Screens flickered with warning messages. Soldiers grabbed their weapons and ran to their positions. "Report," Zell commanded as she marched onto the command bridge. A young officer looked up from his console. His face was pale. "Commander, there is a vessel approaching. It appeared from hyperspace 3 minutes ago. Configuration, unknown. Commander. But, the officer hesitated. It matches the description from the Imperial alert. The vessel that attacked the frontier fleet. Zell felt a chill run down her spine. Every commander in the Dominion had received that alert. Every one of them had studied the footage, and every one of them had prayed they would never see that ship in person. She walked to the main viewing window. The station's defensive platforms were already tracking the approaching object. Missile batteries were loaded. Energy shields were at maximum power. Korath Station had enough firepower to destroy a small fleet, and there it was. A tiny ship, barely visible against the darkness of space. It looked pathetic, next to the massive station. It looked like a toy, but Zell had seen the footage. She knew what that toy had survived. "Hail them," she ordered. "On all frequencies." "Yes, Commander." The communications officer sent the message. Seconds passed. Minutes. The small ship continued its approach. It did not respond. "No reply, Commander." Zell gripped the railing in front of her. "Send it again. Tell them to identify themselves and state their purpose, or we will open fire." The message was sent. The silence continued. The small ship was getting closer now. Zell could see more details through the enhanced displays. The hull was covered in strange symbols she did not recognize. Parts of the ship seemed to be made from different materials, patched together over many years. It should not have been able to fly at all, and yet it moved with perfect grace. Its approach was smooth and calculated. It knew exactly where it was going. "Power up all weapons," Zell ordered. "Target that vessel." "Commander." The Imperial alert said that conventional weapons were ineffective against— "I know what the alert said," Zell snapped. "But we have to try. We cannot simply let it approach without resistance." The weapons officer nodded and activated the targeting systems. Hundreds of guns turned toward the small ship. The station's main cannon began to charge with a deep hum that vibrated through the floor. The small ship stopped. It hung in space, motionless, about 5 kilometers from the station. For a long moment, nothing happened. Zell held her breath. Then every screen on the station flickered. "What is happening?" Zell demanded. "Unknown, Commander. Some kind of signal is being broadcast. It is overriding our systems. Block it. We cannot. The encryption is beyond anything we have ever seen. It is passing through our firewalls like they do not exist." The screens went dark. Then they lit up again with new images. Zell saw a planet. A beautiful blue world with green continents and white clouds. She had never seen it before, but somehow she knew what it was. Earth. The image changed. Ships appeared in orbit around the planet. Valori warships, thousands of them, arranged in perfect formation. Their weapons were charging. "No," Zell whispered. "No, this cannot be." The bombardment began. Fire rained down from the sky. Cities vanished in nuclear light. Oceans turned to steam. Mountains crumbled. The beautiful blue world became a ball of flame and ash. Every screen on Korath Station showed the same thing. Every soldier, every worker, every person on the station watched the destruction of Earth. The footage continued. It showed other scenes. Colony ships being destroyed while trying to flee. Space stations torn apart by Valori weapons. Small vessels, carrying desperate refugees, hunted down and eliminated one by one. And then the camps. On a moon called Luna, the Valori had gathered survivors, humans who had been captured rather than killed. The footage showed what happened to them. It showed the experiments, the torture, the mass executions. Zell fell to her knees. She had served the Dominion her entire life. She had believed in its justice, its order, its righteousness. She had been taught that the Empire brought peace to the galaxy. She had never known about this. Around her, soldiers were crying. Some were vomiting. Others simply stared at the screens with empty eyes. The truth was too horrible to process. The footage ended. A new image appeared on every screen. A symbol that Zell did not recognize but somehow understood. It was a circle containing a small blue dot. Earth, as seen from deep space. Then words appeared, written in the common language of the Dominion. "This is what your empire hid from you. This is the truth they erased. The humans were not a threat. They were children of the stars, just beginning their journey. And your leaders murdered them all, or so they believed." The screens went dark again. Normal systems slowly returned. Zell stood up on shaking legs. Her world had been destroyed more completely than Earth itself. "Commander," the weapons officer said, "the vessel is moving again. Should we fire?" Zell looked at the small ship through the window. It was heading directly toward the station now. She should give the order. She should protect her station and her people. That was her duty. But what was duty worth when everything she believed was a lie? "Do not fire," she said. "Let it approach." "Commander," I said, "do not fire. That is an order." The small ship came closer. It passed the defense perimeter without slowing down. The weapon platforms tracked it but did not fire. The missiles remained in their tubes. The ship stopped directly in front of the main observation window. It was so close that Zell could see individual plates on its hull. She could see the marks of countless repairs. She could see the scars of a journey longer than imagination. A communication signal reached the station. Audio only. "This is the human vessel Remembrance calling Korath Station." The voice was female. Calm, cold. "My name is Yara Chen. I am a descendant of the survivors. I am here to remind your galaxy of a crime that has been hidden for too long." Zell stepped forward. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. "We saw the footage. Is it real? Every second of it. I have more. The archives of the Vylori Dominion contain records of atrocities beyond counting, not just against my people, but against dozens of species throughout the galaxy. Your empire was built on death and lies. What do you want?" Zell asked. "Revenge?" There was a pause. When the human spoke again, her voice carried a weight of centuries. "I want you to understand something, Commander. My ship has technology that your empire cannot match. I could destroy this station in seconds. I could destroy every station, every fleet, every world in the Dominion. I have the power to do to your people what your ancestors did to mine." Zell closed her eyes. She waited for death. "But I am not going to do that," Yara Chen continued. "Because that would make me exactly what your leaders claimed humans were. Dangerous, destructive, a threat to be eliminated. I refuse to prove them right." Zell opened her eyes. "Then what are you going to do?" "I am going to do what your empire fears most. I am going to tell the truth. To everyone. Every species under Vylori rule will see what I showed you today. They will learn what your leaders have hidden. They will know the real face of the Dominion." The screens on the station flickered again. New images appeared. Reports from other stations, other worlds. The transmission was being broadcast everywhere. Billions of beings across the galaxy were seeing the same footage that Korath Station had witnessed. "You cannot stop the truth," Yara Chen said. "It spreads faster than any weapon." Alarms began sounding across the station. Reports came in from every department. The weapons systems were failing. The defensive shields were dropping. The engines were shutting down. "What have you done?" Zell demanded. "I have disabled your station. Your weapons cannot fire. Your shields cannot protect you. You are helpless." Fear flooded through Zell. This was it. Despite her words, the human would destroy them. It was only logical. It was what the Vylori would do. "But I have not harmed a single person," Yara Chen continued. "Your crew is safe. Your life support is functioning. You will drift here until rescue arrives. But you will live. All of you." "Why?" Zell could not understand. "After what we did to your people, why would you show us mercy?" "Because mercy is what separates us from monsters. Because my ancestors did not escape into the void just to become another empire of killers. Because somewhere, somehow, this cycle of death has to end." The small ship began to move again. It drifted away from the station, heading back toward open space. "Tell your High Arbiter something for me," Yara Chen said. "Tell him that this was not an attack. This was a warning. The humans have returned, and we remember everything. But we have also learned something in our long exile. We have learned that the greatest victory is not the destruction of your enemy. It is the destruction of hatred itself." The ship's engines glowed with blue light. Space bent around it. "We will meet again, Commander. I hope that when we do, you will have decided what kind of people you want to be." The vessel vanished into hyperspace. Korath Station drifted in silence. Zell stood at the window for a long time. Around her, soldiers were picking themselves up, trying to restore order to the chaos. Medical teams were treating those who had collapsed from shock. Communications officers were attempting to reach other stations, but Zell could not move. She kept thinking about the human's words, about the footage she had seen, about the empire she had served her entire life. Everything was different now. The truth was out. Billions of beings across the galaxy knew what the Dominion had done. They knew about the Purge. They knew about the other species who had suffered under Valori rule. They knew that their leaders were liars and murderers, and they knew that the humans had survived. Reports began to come in over the next few hours. Other stations had been attacked in the same way. Disabled but not destroyed. Their crews left alive but humiliated. The humans' message had reached every corner of the Dominion. More disturbing were the reports from the conquered worlds. On Kethmar, where the insectoid species had been enslaved for 800 years, there were riots in the streets. On Orani Prime, the peaceful aquatic people were refusing to work in the Valori factories. On 100 worlds, in 100 different ways, the oppressed were beginning to rise. High Arbiter Thesson received the reports in his command chamber. His face was a mask of cold fury. The council had been in emergency session for hours. Some wanted to crush the rebellions immediately. Others wanted to negotiate. A few were even suggesting surrender. Find that ship, Thesson ordered for the 100th time. I want Admiral Vrex and the Third Armada, hunting it across every system. I want it found and destroyed. High Arbiter, one of his advisors said carefully. The human vessel has technology far beyond ours. The Third Armada may not be able to. I do not want to hear excuses, Thesson shouted. I want results. The Dominion has ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. We will not be brought down by one ship and one human. But even as he gave the orders, Thesson felt doubt creeping into his hearts. The human had not attacked. She had not killed. She had simply told the truth, and the truth was tearing his empire apart. For 3,000 years, the Valori had believed they were safe. They had erased the humans from history. They had convinced themselves that the threat was gone forever. They had been wrong, and now, somewhere in the darkness between stars, a ghost was watching. A ghost who remembered. A ghost who had waited 3 millennia for this moment. The humans had returned, not as conquerors, but as witnesses, not as destroyers, but as reminders, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Vrex received her orders on the bridge of her flagship, the Dominion's pride. She was the most decorated officer in the Valori fleet. She had won battles against impossible odds. She had never known defeat, but as she studied the footage from Korath Station, she felt something she had not felt in decades. Uncertainty. The human ship was small and crude. It should have been easy prey, but it had survived weapons that could crack planets. It had disabled one of the most powerful stations in the Dominion without firing a single shot, and its pilot had shown mercy when she had every reason to show none. Vrex thought about her training, her experience, her years of service. She thought about what it meant to be a warrior. She thought about honor and duty and victory. Then she thought about a planet called Earth, burning in nuclear fire. She thought about 8 billion people dying in agony. She thought about the camps on Luna, and she wondered, for the first time in her life, if she was fighting for the right side. The Third Armada set course for the frontier. 50 warships, each one capable of devastating destruction. They would hunt the human vessel across the galaxy. They would find it. They would corner it. And then, what? Vrex did not know. She only knew that something had changed. The galaxy had been shown a truth that could not be unseen. The Dominion had been revealed as something other than what it claimed to be, and somewhere out there, a single human was waiting. Patient, determined, unafraid. The hunt was beginning, but Vrex could not shake the feeling that the Dominion was not the hunter, it was the prey. The Third Armada found the human vessel near the burning nebula, a region of space where dying stars had scattered their remains across 1,000 light-years. Admiral Vrex stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the small ship on her tactical display. It was not running. It was not hiding. It was simply waiting, as if it had expected them. All ships report ready, Admiral, her second-in-command said. We have the vessel surrounded. There is no escape route. Vrex nodded slowly. 50 warships against one tiny craft. The mathematics should have been overwhelming. But she had seen the footage from Korath Station. She had read the reports from the Frontier Fleet. She knew that mathematics did not apply here. Open a channel, she ordered. I want to speak with the pilot. Yes, Admiral. The communication link crackled to life. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a voice came through, calm and measured. "Admiral Vrex, I was wondering when you would find me. You know my name? I know everything about you. I have studied the Dominion for a very long time. You are considered their finest military commander. Brave, intelligent, honorable, by Valori standards." Vrex gripped the arms of her command chair. "Then you know that I have orders to destroy you." "I know. I also know that you have been thinking about what you saw at Korath Station. The footage from the Purge. The truth about your empire." The bridge went quiet. Every officer was listening, pretending to focus on their stations. Vrex felt exposed, as if the human could see directly into her mind. "That footage may have been fabricated," Vrex said, though her voice lacked conviction. "You do not believe that. Neither does anyone who saw it. The Dominion's own archives were the source. Your leaders kept detailed records of their crimes. They were proud of what they did. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand what you are about to face. I could destroy your fleet, Admiral. Every ship, every crew member. I have the power to do it. But I would prefer not to. I would prefer to show you something instead." Vrex hesitated. Her training told her to attack immediately. Her instincts told her to wait. "Show me what?" "The truth. Not just about the Purge, but about who we are. About what humanity became during our exile. Your empire murdered 8 billion of our people, but 10,000 survived. Let me tell you what happened to us." The tactical display flickered. New images appeared, transmitted from the human vessel directly to every ship in the fleet. Vrex watched as the story unfolded. 3,000 years ago, a colony ship called the Exodus had fled the human solar system just hours before the final bombardment. It carried 10,000 people in cryogenic sleep, along with the collective knowledge of human civilization. The ship's captain, a woman named Sarah Chen, had made a desperate decision. Rather than trying to hide within the galaxy where the Valori would eventually find them, she had pointed the ship toward the void between galaxies. It was a journey of unimaginable distance. The nearest galaxy was millions of light years away. No species had ever attempted such a crossing. The Exodus had only basic faster-than-light capability, enough to move between star systems but not to cross the intergalactic gulf. So they did something else. "We drifted," Yara Chen's voice explained over the images. "For 3,000 years, we floated in the darkness between galaxies. The void was empty, cold, silent. There was nothing but the ship and the people inside it." The images showed the interior of the Exodus. Generation after generation of humans living in cramped quarters, recycling every resource, fighting to survive in conditions that should have killed them. "We should have died," Yara continued. "Our ship was not designed for such a long journey. Systems failed. Resources ran low. There were times when extinction seemed certain, but the humans did not die. They adapted. We changed ourselves. We merged with our ship's artificial intelligence. We learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level. We developed new sciences that your empire has never imagined. The void taught us patience. It taught us to see time differently. A century became like a year. A millennium became like a generation. The images showed humans that looked different from the records of Earth. They were taller, thinner, with eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. They moved with strange grace, as if gravity affected them differently than other beings. "We are no longer what we were," Yara said. "We are something new, something that evolved in the silence between stars. But we never forgot where we came from. We never forgot what was taken from us." Admiral Vrex watched in silence. Her crew was frozen at their stations, transfixed by the story unfolding before them. "Why are you telling us this?" Vrex asked. "Why reveal your secrets to your enemies? Because you are not our enemies, Admiral. You are the soldiers of an empire that committed a terrible crime. But you did not commit that crime. You were not even born when it happened. We do not blame you for the sins of your ancestors. Then what do you want?" "We want justice, but not the kind of justice that comes from revenge. We want the truth to be known. We want the galaxy to see what the Dominion really is. And then, we want the galaxy to choose its own future." The images changed again. They showed the Exodus arriving at its destination after 3,000 years of travel. A small galaxy, far from the Milky Way, where the humans had built a new civilization, cities of crystal floating in space, forests growing on artificial worlds, children playing under alien suns. "We found a new home," Yara said. We built a new society. We could have stayed there forever, safe and isolated, letting the galaxy forget we ever existed. But that would have been wrong. Why? Because we are not the only victims. Your empire has conquered and enslaved dozens of species. The Keithmari, the Orani, the Silvax, and countless others. They suffer under Vialori rule just as we once did. We cannot save ourselves and abandon them. Vrex thought about the species Yara had named. She had fought against some of them during the conquests. She had helped crush their resistance. She had told herself that it was for the good of the galaxy, that the Dominion brought order and civilization. Now she wondered if she had been wrong. So you are here to start a war? Vrex said. No, Admiral. I am here to end one. The war that the Dominion has been fighting against the galaxy for 12,000 years. The war against freedom, against truth, against life itself. That war ends now. Not with weapons, but with knowledge. As if on cue, reports began flooding into the flagship. Across the Dominion, rebellions were spreading. The footage from Korath Station had inspired billions of oppressed beings to rise up against their rulers. Factories were shutting down. Soldiers were refusing orders. Governments were collapsing. On Kethmar, the insectoid people had overwhelmed the Valori garrison, using nothing but their numbers and their rage. They had been slaves for 8 centuries. They had finally remembered how to be free. On Urani Prime, the aquatic people had destroyed the dams that the Vialori had built to control their oceans. Water flooded through the industrial centers that had poisoned their world. The factories drowned, and the Urani sang songs of liberation for the first time in generations. On 100 other worlds, similar scenes were playing out. The Dominion was crumbling from within, not because of military defeat, but because the truth had made its foundations worthless. You see, Admiral, Yara said, we are not conquerors. We are messengers. The message we carry is simple. The galaxy does not belong to the Valori. It belongs to everyone who lives in it. And everyone has the right to be free. Vrex looked at her tactical display. Her fleet still surrounded the human vessel. Her weapons were still ready to fire. She could still follow her orders and attempt to destroy this enemy. But what would be the point? The damage was already done. The truth was spreading faster than any fleet could travel. Even if she destroyed this one ship, she could not destroy what it represented. And there was something else. Something she did not want to admit, even to herself. She was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of conquering. Tired of pretending that the Dominion was righteous when she had always suspected it was not. She had spent her entire life serving an empire that murdered billions and enslaved the survivors. She had told herself it was necessary, that it was for the greater good, that she had no choice. But there was always a choice. The humans had proven that. They had survived impossible odds. They had crossed the void between galaxies. They had returned with the power to destroy everything. But they had chosen mercy instead. If they could change, maybe the Valori could too. All ships, Vrex said suddenly. Her voice was steady and clear. Stand down. Power down weapons, and withdraw to safe distance. Admiral, her second-in-command stared at her in shock. Our orders came from leaders who committed genocide and lied about it for 3,000 years. I am no longer certain those orders should be followed. The bridge erupted in confused chatter. Some officers moved to obey. Others hesitated. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then the communication channel crackled with Yara Chen's voice. Admiral, I did not expect that. I am impressed. Do not be, Vrex said. I am not doing this because I agree with everything you have said. I am doing this because I need time to think. I need to understand what is happening before I make any more decisions. That is all I ask. Think. Question. Decide for yourself what is right. That is what freedom means. The Third Armada began to withdraw. Ship by ship, the great warships pulled back from the small human vessel. It was not a surrender, but it was not an attack either. It was something new, something that had never happened in 12,000 years of Valori history. A warrior had chosen peace. Word of Rex's decision spread quickly. Some called her a traitor. Others called her a hero. The Dominion's military was thrown into chaos as commanders argued about what to do. Some followed her example and stood down. Others remained loyal to the High Arbiter and continued the hunt for rebels. On Valori Prime, High Arbiter Thesson received the news with cold fury. He had trusted Vrex. He had given her the finest fleet in the Dominion, and she had betrayed him. She will be executed, he declared to the council. Her and everyone who follows her. This rebellion ends now. But the council was no longer united. Some members had seen the footage from Korath Station and were having doubts of their own. Others were more concerned with the spreading chaos across the Empire. The Dominion was coming apart at the seams, and no one seemed to know how to stop it. Perhaps, Councillor Mayeth said carefully, we should consider negotiation. The human seems willing to talk. If we could reach some kind of agreement, negotiate with a human. Thessen's voice was filled with contempt. Have you forgotten what they are? Our ancestors knew. They understood that humans were a threat that had to be eliminated. That is why they ordered the purge. Our ancestors murdered 8 billion people, Mayeth replied. Women, children, innocents who had done nothing wrong. I watched the footage, Thessen. I saw what we did. How can you defend that? I defend the survival of our species. The humans would destroy us if they could. Would they? Their ship had the power to devastate Korath Station, but it left everyone alive. Admiral Vrex's fleet surrounded them, but they did not fight. Everything the human has done suggests they do not want violence. Then they are fools. Thessen snarled. And we should take advantage of their foolishness. But even as he spoke, Thessen felt his control slipping away. The council was divided. The military was fractured. The subject species were rising up across the Empire. Everything he had built, everything his ancestors had built, was falling apart, and at the center of it all was one small ship and one human woman. Yara Chen guided the remembrance through a quiet region of space, far from the battle lines and the burning worlds. She had not slept in days. The weight of her mission pressed down on her like the gravity of a dying star. She was the last of the original crew. The others had died during the long journey, one by one, until only she remained. She had been the youngest when they left the galaxy beyond. Now she was old by human standards, kept alive only by the technology her people had developed in the void. But she was not alone. The ship's artificial intelligence, an entity named Hope, had been her companion for centuries. Hope was not just a machine, it was a fusion of human minds and digital consciousness, the culmination of everything the survivors had learned. You did well today, Hope said. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a gentle presence in her mind. Admiral Vrex's decision to stand down was unexpected. It suggests that change is possible, even among the Veilori. One admiral is not an empire, Yara replied. Thessen will not stop. He cannot stop. If he admits that the purge was wrong, his entire world collapses. True. But empires are made of individuals. Each person who questions, each soldier who refuses an order, each citizen who demands the truth, they all weaken the foundation. Eventually, the structure cannot hold. Yara looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were fighting for their freedom. Some would die. Many had already died. The price of liberation was always paid in blood, but she remembered something her grandmother had told her, long ago on the Exodus, when Yara was just a child. The darkness cannot last forever, her grandmother had said. It may seem endless. It may seem like the light will never return, but morning always comes. Always. You just have to survive long enough to see it. Yara had survived. Her people had survived. And now, after 3,000 years of darkness, the morning was finally beginning to break. She turned her ship toward the heart of the Dominion. There was still work to do. The truth had been revealed, but the battle was not over. The Veilori still held power. The enslaved species still needed help. The galaxy still needed to heal. But for the first time since leaving her home, Yara allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Not the AI that shared her mind, but the emotion itself. The belief that things could get better. The faith that suffering was not eternal. The knowledge that even the mightiest empires could fall, and from their ruins, something better could grow. She was a ghost of a murdered world. She was the last memory of 8 billion voices silenced in fire. She was the vessel of 3,000 years of exile and evolution, and she was not finished yet. The galaxy was waking up. The chains were breaking. The truth was spreading like wildfire across the stars, and somewhere in the void, the rest of humanity was watching. Millions of them now, descendants of the original 10,000, waiting to see if their galaxy was ready to welcome them home. The awakening had begun. Nothing would ever be the same. The Imperial Palace on Valori Prime was burning, not with real fire, but with the flames of chaos that had spread across the Empire. Reports flooded in from every corner of Dominion space. Rebellions on 40 worlds. Military defections in 12 fleets. 3 council members had fled the capital, seeking safety on neutral stations. High Arbiter Thesson stood alone in his command chamber, surrounded by screens showing disaster after disaster. His golden robes were stained with the dust of fallen decorations. His crown sat crooked on his head. His 4 eyes were wild with fury and fear. Everything was falling apart. In 3 weeks, the human vessel had done more damage to the Dominion than 1,000 enemy fleets could have achieved in centuries. Not through weapons, but through truth. The footage from Korath Station had sparked fires that could not be extinguished. Species that had been conquered generations ago were remembering their freedom. Valori citizens were questioning their leaders. Soldiers were refusing to fight. And through it all, the human ship moved like a ghost through the stars, appearing here and there, always one step ahead of the hunters. Every time they found it, it would broadcast more evidence of Dominion crimes, then vanish before a single shot could be fired. Thesson had tried everything. He had offered rewards for information. He had threatened punishment for anyone who aided the human. He had deployed his remaining loyal fleets in desperate pursuit. Nothing worked. The human was not just fighting a war. She was performing a surgical operation, cutting away the lies that held the Empire together, exposing the rot beneath the surface. And now Thesson had only one option left. He walked to a sealed vault at the back of his command chamber. His hand trembled as he entered the access code. The door slid open, revealing a simple console with a single button. The God Spear. It was the most terrible weapon in the Valori arsenal. It could not be stopped, could not be deflected, could not be survived. The God Spear did not attack ships or stations. It attacked stars. It triggered a chain reaction that caused a sun to explode, destroying everything in its system. It had been used only once before, 3,000 years ago, against a star called Sol. Against Earth. Thesson stared at the button. His ancestors had built this weapon to eliminate threats to Valori supremacy. They had believed that some species were too dangerous to be allowed to exist. They had decided that murder on a planetary scale was acceptable if it preserved their power. And now, Thesson was about to prove them right. His plan was simple. The human vessel was too fast, too advanced, too unpredictable to be caught by conventional means. But the God Spear did not need to catch it. The God Spear only needed a target, and Thesson had chosen one. Valori Prime itself. He would aim the weapon at his own star. He would threaten to destroy his own homeworld, his own people, billions of innocent lives. And he would broadcast his ultimatum across the galaxy. Surrender the human, or watch the heart of the Dominion die. It was madness. Thesson knew that. But he also knew that the human's greatest weakness was her compassion. She had refused to kill, even when she had every right to. She had shown mercy to her enemies. Again and again. She believed in the value of innocent life. Thesson would use that belief against her. If she truly cared about preventing death, she would have no choice. She would surrender herself to save Valori Prime. And once Thesson had her, once he had her ship and her technology, he could restore order. He could crush the rebellions. He could rebuild the Dominion stronger than before. All it would cost was his willingness to murder his own people if she refused. He pressed the button. Deep in space, far from any inhabited system, a massive structure began to wake. The God Spear was not a ship. It was a platform. A weapon system the size of a small moon, hidden in the darkness for 3 millennia. It had waited patiently for this moment, its ancient systems dormant but functional. Now those systems came alive. Power flowed through circuits that had not been used since the Purge. Targeting computers calculated trajectories. The weapon's core began to charge with energy that could tear a sun apart. The God Spear was ready. Thesson broadcast his ultimatum. Every screen in the galaxy showed his face, haggard and desperate but still commanding. Citizens of the Dominion, rebels, and you, human, wherever you are hiding, I am High Arbiter Thesson, leader of the Valori people. I have activated the God Spear and aimed it at our own sun. He paused, letting the words sink in. In 12 hours, unless the human vessel Remembrance surrenders to Dominion forces, I will fire. Valori Prime and everything in its system will be destroyed. 12 billion of my own people will die. And, It will be the humans' fault. Another pause. You have shown the galaxy that you care about innocent life. You have refused to kill even when you could. Now I am calling your bluff. Come to me. Surrender your ship. End this conflict, or watch another world burn. Just like Earth burned 3,000 years ago. The choice is yours. The transmission ended. The galaxy held its breath. On the remembrance, Yara Chen stared at the screen in horror. Hope's presence filled her mind with calculations and projections, but she barely noticed. All she could think about was Theson's face, the madness in his eyes, the certainty that he would do exactly what he threatened. He is serious, Hope said. Analysis of his psychological profile suggests a high probability that he will fire the weapon if you do not comply. 12 billion people, Yara whispered. He would murder 12 billion of his own people just to defeat me. The God Spear was designed for exactly this purpose. Your ancestors were its first victims. Now Theson is willing to use it on his own homeworld. Yara closed her eyes. Her mind raced through possibilities. She could ignore the ultimatum and hope Theson was bluffing. But he was not bluffing. She could see it in his eyes. She could try to attack the God Spear directly. But the weapon was massive and heavily defended. Even with her advanced technology, she might not be able to destroy it in time. She could flee. She could leave this galaxy behind and return to her people in the void. Let the Dominion tear itself apart. Let Theson murder his own world. It would not be her fault, but it would be, because she had started this. She had come here to bring down the Dominion, to expose their crimes, to give the galaxy a chance at freedom. If she abandoned them now, everything she had done would be meaningless, and 12 billion innocent people would die. Vailori people. The descendants of those who had murdered her ancestors. The children and grandchildren of the soldiers who had bombed Earth into ash. She had every reason to hate them, to let them suffer as her people had suffered, but she could not do it. She could not become what they were. Hope, she said. Can we stop the God Spear? Unknown. The weapon specifications are not in any database we have accessed. It may be vulnerable to our technology, or it may not. The only way to know is to try. And if we fail, then 12 billion people die. Or you surrender and Theson gains access to our technology, which he will use to rebuild his empire and crush any hope of freedom for the galaxy. Yara laughed bitterly. Those are terrible options. Yes, they are. She sat in silence for a long time. The weight of 3,000 years pressed down on her. The memories of her ancestors, stored in her mind through the neural link with Hope, cried out for vengeance. The Vailori had shown no mercy to Earth. Why should she show mercy to them? But another voice spoke to her. The voice of her grandmother, who had died on the Exodus when Yara was still young. The voice of the elders who had guided her people through the void. The voice of everyone who had worked to build a new humanity, better than the old. We survived because we held on to what made us human, her grandmother had said. We could have become monsters. The void tried to make us cold and cruel, but we refused. We chose love over hate. We chose hope over despair. We chose to be better than those who tried to destroy us. Do not let vengeance make you into what they were. Yara opened her eyes. Her decision was made. Set course for Vailori Prime. She said, Yara, the risk. I know the risk. I am not going to let 12 billion people die. Not even to save myself. The remembrance turned toward the heart of the Dominion. Its engines glowed with the light of technologies that the Vailori could not understand. It was the fastest ship in the galaxy, carrying the last survivor of Earth's destruction toward the world of her enemies. Word spread quickly. The human was coming. She had 12 hours to reach Vailori Prime before the God Spear fired. It should have been impossible. The distance was too great, the time too short. But the remembrance was not an ordinary ship. It moved through space in ways that violated every law the Dominion understood. It did not just travel faster than light. It folded space itself, stepping from one point to another like a god walking across the universe. Yara pushed the ship harder than she ever had before. Warning lights flashed across her console. The hull groaned under stresses it was not designed to handle. Hope's voice filled her mind with concerns and calculations. The structural integrity is failing. If we continue at this rate, the ship will tear itself apart before we arrive. Then we tear ourselves apart. Yara said. We do not stop. She thought about Earth. A world she had never seen, knew only through recordings and memories. a beautiful blue planet that had been home to 8 billion souls. Her ancestors had built great cities there. They had created art and music and literature. They had loved and dreamed and hoped. And then the Valori had come, and all of it had ended in fire. Now the descendants of those murderers were in danger, and Yara was racing to save them. If her ancestors could see her now, what would they think? Would they understand? Would they be proud? Or would they call her a traitor for helping those who had destroyed everything? She did not know. She could not know. The dead could not speak, and she was the only one left to make the choice. So she made it. She chose mercy. She chose to be better than her enemies. She chose to prove that humanity was not what the Valori had feared. The hours passed in a blur of speed and light. The remembrance screamed through the cosmos, its hull glowing from the friction of reality itself. Yara did not sleep. She did not eat. She simply flew, pushing forward with every ounce of strength she had left. And finally, with less than an hour to spare, she arrived. Valori Prime hung in space before her. It was a beautiful world, covered in purple oceans and silver cities. 12 billion people lived there. Children were playing in parks. Workers were going about their daily tasks. Families were sharing meals together. None of them knew how close they were to death. The God Spear was visible on her sensors, a massive structure positioned between the planet and its sun. It was already charged, ready to fire. Thesson had not been bluffing. He was prepared to murder his own people. Yara opened a communication channel. Her face appeared on screens across the planet, across the Dominion, across the entire galaxy. "This is Yara Chen of the vessel Remembrance," she said. "High Arbiter Thesson has threatened to destroy this world if I do not surrender. I have come to tell him my answer." She paused, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. "My answer is no. I will not surrender. But I will not let you die either. The Valori killed 8 billion of my people 3,000 years ago. I refuse to become what you were. I refuse to watch innocent people burn." She turned the remembrance toward the God Spear. "I am going to stop this weapon. Not for the Dominion. Not for vengeance. But because that is what humanity is. That is what we survived 3,000 years in the void to remember." On Valori Prime, Thesson watched in disbelief. The human was not running. She was not surrendering. She was attacking. "Fire the God Spear!" he screamed. "Fire now, High Arbiter. The weapon needs 30 more minutes to reach full power. I do not care. Fire." The God Spear trembled. Energy began to build in its core. It was not at full power, but it might be enough. It might be enough to kill the star and destroy everything. Yara saw the weapon charging. She had only minutes to act. The remembrance was fast, but the God Spear was enormous. She did not know if she could stop it, but she was going to try. "Hope," she said. "Everything we have. Put everything into the deflector systems. Yara. That will leave us defenseless. Do it." The ship's shields expanded, forming a web of energy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was technology born in the void between galaxies, refined over 3,000 years of isolation. It was the culmination of human ingenuity and desperation. And it was about to be tested against the weapon that had killed Earth. The God Spear fired. A beam of pure destruction lanced through space, heading for the star at the center of the Valori system. If it reached its target, the sun would explode. 12 billion people would die. But standing in the way was one small ship and one human woman. Yara Chen closed her eyes and waited for the impact. The beam struck the Remembrance's shields. Energy exploded around her, filling the universe with light. The ship shook and screamed. Warning alarms blared from every system. Hope's voice was lost in static and chaos, but Yara held on. The shields bent. They warped. They absorbed energy that should have been impossible to contain. The beam pushed against them, trying to break through, trying to reach the star beyond. And slowly, impossibly, the shields held. Yara felt the ship dying around her. Systems failed one by one. The hull began to crack. Blood ran from her nose and ears as the forces tore at her body, but she did not let go. She held the shields together through sheer will, channeling everything she had into one desperate act of defiance. The God Spear was not designed for sustained fire. It was meant to deliver one overwhelming blow, not to fight a battle of attrition. Its power began to fade as the beam continued, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, the weapon fell silent. The remembrance drifted in space, broken and burning. Yara lay in her command chair, barely conscious. Hope's voice was a whisper in her mind, fading in and out. Yara, the beam. We redirected it. Into the void. The star is safe. Valori Prime is safe. She tried to speak, but no words came. Her body was failing. The ship was failing. Everything was ending. But 12 billion people were alive, and that was enough. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in stunned silence. They had seen the human ship intercept the Godspear's beam. They had seen one woman sacrifice herself to save the people who had destroyed her ancestors. On Valori Prime, soldiers dropped their weapons and wept. In the rebel strongholds, fighters fell to their knees in awe. On 100 conquered worlds, slaves looked up at the sky and understood what they had witnessed. A human had saved the galaxy, and in doing so, she had proven what humanity truly was. Thesson stood alone in his chamber, watching the dying ship on his screen. The weapon was exhausted. His plan had failed. The human had beaten him, not through superior firepower, but through superior spirit. He had nothing left. The doors to his chamber burst open. Admiral Vrex stood there, flanked by soldiers who had once been loyal to him. Their weapons were raised, pointed at his heart. High Arbiter Thesson, Vrex said. Her voice was cold and hard. You are under arrest for crimes against the Dominion and crimes against the galaxy. Your reign is over. Thesson did not resist. He had no more strength left for fighting. He simply stood there as the soldiers took his crown and bound his hands. The Dominion was falling. But somewhere in space, a broken ship drifted in silence, and Yara Chen waited to see if she would survive the dawn. The remembrance drifted through the darkness like a wounded bird. Its hull was torn open in a dozen places. Its engines had gone silent. Its systems flickered on and off, barely holding together. Inside, Yara Chen lay motionless in her command chair, her body broken but still breathing. Across the galaxy, rescue ships raced toward her position. Valori vessels, rebel fighters, ships from every species that had witnessed her sacrifice. They came not as enemies, but as something else, something new. Admiral Vrex arrived first. Her flagship had been closest to Valori Prime when the Godspear fired. She had watched the human ship intercept the beam. She had seen the impossible happen. Now she stood on the bridge, watching the broken remembrance on her view screen. Her crew worked frantically to establish contact, to find any sign of life. Admiral, her communications officer said, we are detecting a faint signal from the human vessel. It appears to be the ship's artificial intelligence. Put it through. A weak voice came through the speakers. It was not the human woman's voice, but something else. Something deeper and older. This is Hope. Artificial intelligence of the vessel. Remembrance. Commander Chen is severely injured but alive. She requires immediate medical attention. Vrex felt something loosen in her chest. Relief, she realized. She was relieved that the human had survived. The enemy who had torn her empire apart. And she wanted her to live. We are dispatching medical shuttles now, Vrex said. Is there anything else we can do? There is something I must tell you, Hope replied. Before Commander Chen lost consciousness, she gave me instructions. She wanted me to share something with the galaxy. A gift. A gift? The knowledge of the human remnant. All of it. Our technology, our history, our science. Everything we learned during 3,000 years in the void. She wanted me to give it to everyone. Freely, without conditions. Vrex was stunned. Technology that could block a star-killing weapon. Knowledge that had taken millennia to develop. The human was giving it away for nothing. Why would she do that? Because she believed that knowledge should not be hoarded. Because she wanted the galaxy to have a chance to grow and learn and become better. Because she hoped that if everyone had access to the same tools, perhaps they would stop fighting over scraps and start building something beautiful together. The transmission from Hope spread across the galaxy. Every world, every station, every ship received it. Terabytes of information flooded through the networks. Scientists and engineers stared at their screens in disbelief as they saw equations and blueprints and theories that rewrote everything they understood about the universe. The gift of the humans. Given freely, without strings attached. It was an act of trust that the galaxy had never seen before. Medical teams from the Valori flagship reached the remembrance within the hour. They cut through the damaged hull and found Yara Chen still strapped into her chair. She was badly hurt. Her body had absorbed energies that should have killed her instantly. But the strange changes that the void had made to human biology had kept her alive. They carried her gently back to the flagship, treating her injuries as best they could. She was taken to the medical bay and surrounded by the most advanced healing technology the Dominion possessed, and then they waited. Days passed. The galaxy changed around the sleeping human. Thesson was removed from power and taken to stand trial for his crimes. The council was dissolved. The military was restructured under Admiral Vrex's command, with orders to protect rather than conquer. The rebellion slowed as news spread that the war was over. The conquered species were given their freedom. The chains that had bound them for generations were broken at last. On world after world, former slaves walked into the sunlight and breathed the air of liberty. It was not easy. Centuries of oppression could not be undone in a few days. There was anger and resentment and pain on all sides. Some wanted revenge against the Valori. Others struggled to believe that the changes were real. The wounds of history would take generations to heal. But the healing had begun. And that was enough. On the 7th day, Yara Chen opened her eyes. She found herself in a white room filled with strange machines. Valori medical staff surrounded her bed, monitoring her condition. Admiral Vrex stood at the foot of the bed, watching her with an expression that mixed curiosity and respect. "You are alive," Vrex said, "against all odds, against everything we understood about medicine and physics. You survived." Yara tried to speak, but her throat was dry. A nurse brought water, and she drank slowly before answering. "The God Spear?" she asked. "Exhausted. Its power core burned out when you blocked the beam. It will never fire again. Valori Prime? Safe. 12 billion people are alive because of what you did." Yara closed her eyes. She felt tears running down her cheeks, though she was not sure if they were from relief or exhaustion or something else entirely. "Hope?" she asked. "My ship? The AI is intact. Your vessel is badly damaged, but our engineers believe it can be repaired. Hope has been communicating with us, helping us understand the technology you shared. The gift reached everyone?" Vrex nodded. "Every world in the galaxy received it. Our scientists say it will take decades to fully understand everything you gave us. Some of it is so advanced that we cannot even begin to study it yet." "Good," Yara whispered. "That was what I wanted." She lay in silence for a moment, gathering her strength. Then she looked at Vrex with eyes that had seen more than any being should see. "What happens now?" Vrex moved closer to the bed. She was a warrior, trained to fight and kill. But in that moment, she looked almost gentle. "Now we rebuild. The Dominion is over. Something new will take its place. A government that represents all species, not just the Valori. A system based on cooperation instead of conquest. It will not be perfect, and it will take time, but we are going to try. And the humans? My people?" Vrex hesitated. "Hope told us about them. The millions who live in the galaxy beyond. They have been watching everything that happened here. Yes, they sent me ahead as an emissary. To test the waters. To see if this galaxy was worth saving. And what will you tell them?" Yara thought about everything she had experienced. The horrors she had uncovered. The battles she had fought. The impossible choice she had faced. And the sacrifice she had made. "I will tell them to come home," she said. "Not as conquerors or avengers, but as family. We have been separated for too long. It is time for humanity to return to the galaxy where we were born." Word spread quickly. The humans were coming. Not to destroy, but to reunite. The species that had been murdered 3,000 years ago was about to be reborn in the galaxy that had tried to erase them. Some were afraid. Old prejudices do not die easily, and there were those who still believed that humans were dangerous. They whispered that the galaxy was making a mistake, that the humans would eventually turn on them, that the gift of technology was really a trap. But most people felt something different. They felt hope. The humans had survived the worst that the universe could throw at them. They had been hunted to the edge of extinction. They had spent millennia in the coldest darkness imaginable, and they had emerged, not as monsters, but as something beautiful. They had chosen mercy over revenge. They had shared their gifts freely. They had sacrificed everything to save their enemies. If that was what humanity was, then perhaps the galaxy had nothing to fear. 6 months later, the first human ships arrived. They came through a fold in space that opened like a flower blooming. Thousands of vessels, large and small, emerging from the void between galaxies. They were strange and beautiful, designed by minds that had spent 3,000 years evolving in isolation. At the head of the fleet was a single ship. It was massive, larger than any station the Dominion had ever built. Its hull was covered in the history of humanity. Images of Earth were carved into the metal. Names of the dead were written in letters of light. It was a monument, and a vessel and a promise all in one. The ship was called the Memory of Earth. Yara Chen stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, which had been fully repaired and upgraded with technology from both civilizations. She watched the Memory of Earth emerge from the fold and felt tears streaming down her face once more. She had been alone for so long, the last survivor of the original crew, the sole representative of her people in a hostile galaxy. Now, finally, she was surrounded by her own kind. A communication channel opened. A face appeared on her screen. It belonged to a woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She was the elder of the human remnant, the leader of those who had survived the void. "Yara," the elder said. Her voice was warm with affection. "You did it. You brought us home." "Not just me," Yara replied. "I had help. From an admiral who chose peace over war. From rebels who believed in freedom. From a galaxy that decided to change. And from yourself. You carried our memory across the stars. You showed them what we are. You proved that humanity is more than what they feared." Yara looked out at the gathered ships. Human and Valori, Kethmari and Orani, Silvax and a dozen other species, all floating together in the light of the star that had almost died. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we begin the real work. Building a new society, healing old wounds, creating something that has never existed before. A galaxy united not by fear, but by hope." The elder smiled. "It will take generations. We will make mistakes. There will be setbacks and struggles and moments when we wonder if it is worth continuing. But we will persist, because that is what we do. That is what we have always done. Humanity endures. Yes, and now, humanity will help others endure too." The formal ceremonies took place on Valori Prime, in the great plaza where the Imperial Palace had once stood. The palace was being converted into a museum, a place where future generations could learn about the mistakes of the past. Representatives from every species in the galaxy gathered to witness the founding of a new government. It was called the Galactic Commonwealth, and it was built on principles that the Dominion would never have understood. Equality, freedom, justice, the right of every being to live without fear. Admiral Vrek stood at the podium, reading the charter that would bind the Commonwealth together. She was no longer a military leader. She had been elected as the first chancellor, a position of service rather than power. "We, the people of the galaxy, do hereby establish this Commonwealth," she read. "We acknowledge the crimes of the past and commit to preventing them in the future. We recognize the dignity of all sentient life. We pledge to resolve our differences through dialogue, not violence, and we dedicate ourselves to building a future worthy of those who suffered, so that we might have this chance." She paused and looked at Yara Chen, who stood among the human delegation. "This Commonwealth exists because one woman refused to let hatred win. She had every reason to seek revenge, and she chose mercy instead. She had the power to destroy, and she chose to heal. She taught us that strength is not measured by the ability to kill, but by the courage to forgive. Commander Yara Chen, the galaxy owes you a debt that can never be repaid, but we can try to honor it by living according to the principles you demonstrated, by being better than we were, by remembering what humanity taught us." Yara stepped forward to address the crowd. Her legs were still weak from her injuries, but she stood straight and tall. 3,000 years ago, my people were murdered," she said. 8 billion voices were silenced in fire. We were erased from history, forgotten by the galaxy that birthed us. The Valori believed they had eliminated a threat. They thought they were protecting their empire. She looked at the faces around her. Valori faces, some of them descended from those who had ordered the purge. She felt no hatred, only a deep, abiding sadness. They were wrong. Humanity was never a threat. We were just another species trying to find our place in the universe. We had flaws, yes. We made mistakes. But we also had dreams. We had love. We had the capacity for wonder that exists in all sentient beings. What the Dominion did to us was a crime, But the greater crime would be to let that horror define us forever. We could have come back as conquerors. We could have repaid death with death. Instead, we chose another path. We chose to remember not just the pain, but the hope. We chose to hold on to what made us human. Our compassion, our creativity, our stubborn refusal to surrender to darkness. No matter how long the night, she raised her hand toward the sky, where the memory of Earth was visible as a bright dot among the stars. Today, humanity returns to the galaxy. Not as victims, not as victors, but as partners. We bring with us 3,000 years of hard-won wisdom and technology that we share freely with all. We ask nothing in return, except the chance to be part of this community. The past cannot be changed. 8 billion of my ancestors are gone forever. But the future is unwritten. And I believe, with all my heart, that we can write it together. The crowd was silent for a moment. Then the applause began. It started small, from a group of Kethmari who had been slaves until recently. It spread to the Orani, the Silvax, the countless other species who had suffered under Valori rule. And finally, it reached the Valori themselves. They applauded the human who had saved them. They cheered for the woman who had shown them what mercy looked like. They celebrated the beginning of something new. Yara stood in the center of it all, feeling the sound wash over her like a wave. She thought about her grandmother, who had told her stories of Earth when she was young. She thought about the 10,000 survivors who had fled into the void. She thought about the generations who had lived and died in the darkness between galaxies, keeping the flame of humanity alive. They had endured. And now, their descendants were home. That night, there was a celebration that spread across the galaxy. On every world, beings of all species gathered to mark the founding of the Commonwealth. They shared food, and music, and stories. Old enemies sat together and discovered that they were not so different after all. On Valori Prime, Yara Chen walked through the celebration alone. She was tired, bone-deep tired, but she could not sleep. There was too much to see, too much to feel. She found a quiet garden at the edge of the plaza, far from the noise of the crowds. She sat on a bench and looked up at the stars. "Hope?" she said softly. The AI's voice came from a small device on her wrist. They were never truly separate anymore, but Hope had learned to give her privacy when she needed it. "I am here, Yara. Did we do the right thing? Sharing everything, trusting them with our knowledge? I believe so. But the future is uncertain. We have given them tools. How they use those tools will determine what kind of galaxy this becomes. What if they make the same mistakes? What if new empires rise? New wars begin? Then we will face them as we face the Dominion. With courage and compassion, and the refusal to become what we fight against. That is all anyone can do." Yara nodded slowly. She thought about the long journey that had brought her here. The void between galaxies, the endless darkness, the hope that had kept her going when everything seemed lost. "Hope," she said. "The original name for your program. The engineers who created you chose it deliberately. Did they not? They did. They believed that an AI charged with guiding humanity through the void needed more than just logic and efficiency. It needed something to inspire the humans it served. They named me after the thing they valued most. And do you feel it? Hope, I mean. Is it real for you?" The AI was silent for a moment. When it spoke again, there was something almost human in its voice. "I do not know if what I experience is the same as what you feel. But when I watched you intercept the Godspear's beam, when I saw you risk everything to save those who had murdered our ancestors, I felt something I cannot easily describe. It was warm. It was bright. It made me believe that the universe could be good. If that is not hope, then I do not know what hope is." Yara smiled. She reached up and touched the device on her wrist, a gesture of affection for the being who had been her companion through the longest night. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. I could not have done this without you. And I would not have wanted to do it without you." They sat together in the garden, human and AI, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere out there, the rest of humanity was making its way home. Ships full of people who had survived the impossible were returning to the galaxy of their birth. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges and setbacks. Old hatreds would not disappear overnight. The work of building a just and peaceful galaxy would take generations. But for now, in this quiet moment, there was peace. The darkness had lasted 3,000 years. But morning had finally come. And humanity, as it always did, had endured. Far across the galaxy, in the nurseries of 100 worlds, children were being taught a new history. They learned about a species called humans, who had been hunted to near extinction and had returned with forgiveness in their hearts. They learned about a woman named Yara Chen, who had carried the memory of 8 billion souls across the void and had chosen to save her enemies rather than destroy them. The children listened with wide eyes. The story seemed too incredible to be true, but their teachers assured them that it had happened, every word of it. And when the children looked up at the night sky, they knew that somewhere among those distant stars, the humans were watching over them, not as conquerors or judges, but as friends. The galaxy had been given a second chance, a chance to grow beyond its violent past, a chance to become something worthy of the sacrifice that had made it possible. And at the heart of it all, one truth remained: humanity endured. Humanity always endured. And now, at last, humanity was home. The ship moved through space like a small fish swimming toward a whale. It was called the Times Unity Asterisk, and it carried the hopes of every human being alive. Inside, Director Ilara Vance stood at the observation window and watched the massive station grow larger and larger. Nexus Prime, the center of galactic civilization, a structure so big that it made Earth's moon look like a pebble. Millions of beings from hundreds of species lived there. They traded, they talked, they made decisions that shaped the lives of trillions across thousands of star systems. And today, humanity would ask to join them. Ilara was 52 years old. Her hair had turned gray early from stress and worry. She had spent 30 years working toward this moment, first as a scientist, then as a diplomat, and finally as the director of human interstellar relations. She had learned 12 alien languages. She had studied the histories and customs of every species in the galactic conquered. She knew more about alien cultures than most aliens knew about themselves. None of it would matter if the council said no. "Director, we are approaching the docking port," said Captain Torres from behind her. He was a good man. Steady. Calm. Exactly what she needed right now. "Thank you, Captain," Ilara said. She did not turn around. She kept her eyes on the station. Somewhere in that massive structure, 14 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy were waiting for her. They would decide if humanity had a future among the stars, or if humans would remain trapped around their single yellow sun forever. The docking process took 2 hours. Security checks, biological scans, weapon detections. The Concorde was very careful about who they let inside. Ilara understood. When you ruled the galaxy, you made enemies. Precautions were necessary. Finally, they let her through. The corridor to the council chamber was 3 kilometers long. Ilara walked it alone. That was the rule. No guards, no assistants, no support. Each species that came before the council had to send one representative. Just one. It was a test of courage, they said. A way to see what kind of people you truly were. Ilara thought it was just a way to make visitors feel small and afraid. The walls of the corridor were covered with images. Victories of the Concorde. Planets they had conquered. Species they had uplifted, or managed, or contained. The message was clear. We are powerful. You are not. Remember your place. Ilara remembered. She also remembered something else. She remembered being a little girl on Earth, looking up at the stars and wondering if anyone was out there. She remembered the joy when first contact happened. She remembered the hope that filled every human heart when they learned they were not alone. She also remembered the disappointment that came after. The Galactic Concorde had found humanity 60 years ago. They had watched from a distance, studied humans like scientists studying insects. They sent observers but not ambassadors. They took samples but offered nothing in return. When humans finally built ships fast enough to reach other stars, the Conquered had simply warned them to stay in their own system. You are not ready, they had said. Perhaps in 1,000 years. Perhaps never. But humanity had not listened. They had pushed outward anyway. Slowly. Carefully. They had established small colonies on nearby worlds. They had met other species, traded with them, learned from them, and finally, after decades of effort, the Concorde had agreed to hear their petition for membership. This was humanity's chance. Their only chance. The council chamber was round. 14 platforms floated in a circle around a central stage. Each platform held one council member. Each council member represented a species that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Elara walked to the center stage. She was tiny compared to most of them. The Kethra representative was a massive insect, 3 meters tall with gleaming black armor. The Velthari was a being of pure light, shifting and flowing like a living sun. The Dramath was a reptile with scales of deep purple and eyes that seemed to look through her rather than at her. There were others. The fungal mycelians, who communicated through chemical signals. The crystalline architects, who had built Nexus Prime itself. The ancient archivists, who claimed to remember the birth of the first stars. All of them looked down at Elara. All of them waited. "Speak, human," said the Velthari. Its voice was like music and thunder combined. "Tell us why we should allow your kind to join the Concord." Elara had prepared this speech for 10 years. She had practiced it thousands of times. She had consulted with the greatest minds on Earth to craft every word perfectly. "Honored members of the Council," she began. "Humanity comes before you with humility and hope. We are a young species. We have much to learn, but we have also much to offer. We are creative, determined, and adaptable. We have overcome challenges that would have destroyed lesser beings. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters. We have always found a way forward." She paused and looked around the circle. "We do not ask for charity. We ask for opportunity. Let us prove ourselves. Let us contribute to the great work of the Concord. Let us stand beside you as partners in building a better galaxy." Silence followed her words. The council members looked at each other. Some seemed thoughtful. Others seemed amused. One or two seemed annoyed, as if she had interrupted something more important. The Kethra spoke first. Its voice was a series of clicks and hisses that her translator turned into words. "You say you are adaptable. Yet you cannot survive in vacuum. You cannot breathe underwater. You cannot tolerate temperature changes that my larvae endure without discomfort. What adaptation do you speak of?" "We adapt through our minds," Elara said. "We build tools and machines. We create solutions to problems. We change our environment to suit our needs." "So you destroy your environment," the Dramath said. "We have seen what you did to your home world. Pollution, extinction of species, climate damage. You poisoned your own nest. Why would we want such beings among us?" "We made mistakes," Elara admitted. "We learned from them. We are still learning. That is what adaptation means. We see our errors and we correct them. In 10,000 years perhaps," the mycelian representative said. Its chemical signals created words in her translator. "Your species is barely out of its infancy. You discovered fire only a heartbeat ago by our standards. You should return to your world and grow for a few more millennia before bothering us again." Elara felt her heart sinking. This was not going well, but she pressed on. "We understand that we are young, but youth can be a strength. We bring fresh perspectives, new ideas, energy and enthusiasm that older species might have lost over time." The Velthari laughed. At least, Elara thought it was a laugh. The being of light pulsed and flickered in a way that suggested amusement. "Fresh perspectives? Little human, we have seen 1,000,000 species rise and fall. We have witnessed the birth and death of stars. We have solved problems your kind cannot even comprehend. What could you possibly offer that we have not already considered and rejected?" "We offer ourselves," Elara said simply. "Our loyalty, our labor, our dreams. We want to be part of something greater than ourselves. Is that not worth something?" More silence. The council members communicated among themselves in ways Elara could not follow. Private channels, perhaps. Mental links. Secret languages. She stood alone on the central stage and waited for her fate to be decided. Finally, the eldest of the archivists spoke. It was a being that looked like a collection of floating geometric shapes, constantly rearranging themselves into new patterns. Its voice was dry and ancient, like wind blowing through dead leaves. "We have discussed your petition. We have considered your words. We have reviewed the data collected about your species over the past 60 years. Elara held her breath. "The decision of the Council is unanimous. Humanity is denied membership in the Galactic Concord." The words hit Elara like a physical blow. She had prepared herself for this possibility. She had told herself she would accept whatever decision the Council made with grace and dignity. But hearing the actual words was different. It hurt in a way she had not expected. "May I ask why?" she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. The Velthari answered. "You are too young. Too aggressive. Too unpredictable. Your species shows promise perhaps, but also great danger. You wage war among yourselves constantly. You destroy without thinking. You consume without restraint. These are not the qualities we seek in member species. Additionally, the Kethra added, you lack psionic capability. All Concord species possess some form of mental power. Telepathy, telekinesis, precognition. Your brains are blind and deaf to the mental spectrum. You are, in a very real sense, disabled. Your biology is fragile. The Dramath continued. You require very specific conditions to survive. Temperature, atmosphere, gravity, radiation. The range of environments you can tolerate is embarrassingly narrow. You would be a burden to any fleet or station that accepted you. Your homeworld is insignificant, the Mycelian said. A small planet around a small star in a region of space with no strategic value. You control no resources we need. You occupy no territory we want. You are, to be direct, worthless to us. Each word was a knife. Elara stood and accepted them all. She did not argue. She did not beg. There was no point. The decision had been made. Probably it had been made before she even entered the chamber. This hearing had been a formality, nothing more. A chance for the council to explain their contempt to her face. Return to your single star, the Velthari said. Be grateful that we do not classify you as a pest species to be managed. Perhaps in 10,000 years, if you survive, you may petition again. But we doubt you will survive. Species like yours rarely do. Elara looked around the chamber one last time. She saw the dismissal in their eyes, the contempt, the absolute certainty that humanity was nothing and would never be anything. She activated the recording device hidden in her clothing. It was illegal to record council proceedings without permission. She did not care. She captured every face, every gesture, every whispered comment her translators picked up. The Kethra called humans meat that thinks. The Dramath compared them to a disease that needed to be quarantined. The archivist simply ignored her. Already moving on to more important matters, Elara memorized it all. Then she turned and walked back down the 3-kilometer corridor. She did not rush. She did not cry. She kept her head high and her back straight the entire way. Captain Torres was waiting at the ship. He took one look at her face and knew. I'm sorry, Director, he said quietly. Don't be, Elara replied. They showed us exactly what we are to them. That knowledge is valuable. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. Elara spent most of that time alone in her cabin, thinking. By the time the Times Unity Times entered the solar system, she had made her decision. The United Terran Assembly met in Geneva. Representatives from every nation on Earth filled the Great Hall. Billions more watched through screens and broadcasts. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. Everyone wanted to know what came next. Elara stood at the podium and told them the truth. She played the recording of the council session. She let them hear every insult, every dismissal, every expression of contempt. When it was finished, the hall was silent. Some people wept. Some people shouted in anger. Most simply sat in stunned disbelief. Then Elara spoke. They see us as nothing. Less than nothing. Pests. Vermin. A mistake of evolution that will correct itself in time. They believe we will destroy ourselves. They believe we will fail. They believe we will crawl back to our small planet and die in obscurity, while they rule the stars forever. She paused and looked out at the assembled representatives. They are wrong. Her voice grew stronger. They are wrong because they do not understand what we are. They measure worth in years and power in psionic ability. They count our weaknesses and ignore our strengths. They see our fragility and miss our resilience. They see our youth and forget that every ancient species was young once. She pointed to the star map displayed behind her. The Concord controls the core of the galaxy. The rich systems, the developed worlds, the ancient territories. They have everything they want. They have no reason to look beyond their borders. And beyond their borders lies the outer rim. The map shifted to show a vast region of unexplored space. Dark, unknown, ignored. The outer rim is considered worthless. Too far from the core. Too dangerous. Too empty. No Concord species has bothered to explore it in thousands of years. They believe there is nothing there worth having. Elara smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. They gave us nothing. They told us we deserve nothing. So we will take everything they left behind. We will go to the outer rim. We will explore it, settle it, develop it. We will build something new. Something entirely our own, not in their systems, not by their rules, not with their permission. She looked directly into the cameras, speaking now to all of humanity. They cast us aside. They told us we have no place among the stars. Very well. We will make our own place. We will prove them wrong. And one day, when they finally look up from their comfortable thrones and see what we have become, they will understand their mistake. The hall erupted. Some cheered. Some protested. Some demanded war, revenge, immediate action. Others counseled patience, acceptance, waiting for a better time. But Alara had planted the seed. And seeds, once planted, have a way of growing. Over the next 10 years, the Terran Expansion Initiative took shape. Scientists designed new ships capable of traveling farther and faster than anything humanity had built before. Engineers developed technologies for surviving in unknown environments. Billions of people volunteered to leave everything they knew behind and venture into the darkness. Not everyone agreed with the plan. Some thought it was too risky. Some thought it was too expensive. Some thought humanity should simply accept its place and make the best of life in the solar system. But enough people believed. Enough people remembered the Council's contempt and burned with the desire to prove them wrong. Enough people looked at the stars and refused to accept that they were forbidden. Alara Vance watched the first colony ships launch from orbit. She was 62 years old now. She knew she would not live to see what humanity would become. But she had given them direction. She had given them purpose. She had turned rejection into motivation, humiliation into fuel. Her assistant stood beside her, watching the ships disappear into the void. "Do you really think we can do this?" he asked. "Build something out there that will make the Council regret their decision?" Alara did not answer immediately. She thought about the Velthari's laughter, the Kethra's contempt, the Archivist's indifference. She thought about all the species that had looked at humanity and seen nothing worth noticing. "I think," she said slowly, "that they have never met anything like us before. They have conquered and absorbed and managed other species for thousands of years. They know how to handle civilizations that fight back or surrender. But they do not know how to handle a species that simply refuses to accept the verdict." She turned away from the window. "We are going into the darkness. We have no map, no guide, no guarantee of success. We might fail, we might die, we might prove them right after all." She smiled again. That same cold smile she had worn in the council chamber. "But I don't think we will. Because humans do not know how to quit. We do not know how to accept defeat. We do not know how to stay where we are put. Those traits they called weaknesses, aggression, unpredictability, stubbornness, those are our greatest strengths. And one day, the Council will learn that lesson." The colony ships were gone now, swallowed by the infinite dark. But they were not alone. Hundreds more would follow in the years to come. Thousands, millions of people spreading outward into the unknown, carrying with them the dreams and determination of a species that had been told it was worthless. The outer rim was waiting, and humanity was coming. 50 years had passed since the day Alara Vance stood before the Council and was told humanity was worthless. 50 years of building, launching, hoping, and praying. 50 years of ships disappearing into the darkness and messages coming back, sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes not at all. Alara was dead now. She had passed away in her sleep at the age of 89, surrounded by family and friends. Her last words had been a question. "Have we found anything yet?" So, the answer, at that moment, had been no. Not really. The early expeditions had found plenty of empty worlds, rocks and ice and dead planets where nothing lived and nothing grew. Some colonists had settled on these worlds anyway, determined to make something from nothing. Others had pushed deeper into the unknown, searching for something better. But now, finally, they had found it. Captain Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the Times Endeavor Times and stared at the planet below. It was beautiful. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling across the surface. It looked almost like Earth, but bigger, healthier, younger. No pollution darkened its skies. No cities scarred its surface. It was untouched and waiting. "Life signs?" Marcus asked his science officer. Lieutenant Sarah Park checked her instruments. Abundant plant life, animal life in the oceans and on land. No signs of intelligent inhabitants. No artificial structures. No electromagnetic signals. If anyone ever lived here, they left a very long time ago. Marcus nodded slowly. This was the 7th star system they had surveyed in the past year. The previous 6 had been disappointing. Dead worlds, gas giants, asteroid fields with nothing useful. But this one was different. This one was perfect. Send word back to the fleet, he ordered. Tell them we found it. Kepler, 442b. Habitable. Unclaimed. Ours. The message took weeks to reach Earth. By the time it arrived, Marcus and his crew had already landed and begun their initial survey. What they found changed everything. The planet was not empty after all. Not completely. The ruins were ancient. Thousands of years old. Maybe millions. Crumbling structures made of materials Marcus did not recognize. Strange symbols carved into walls that had stood longer than human civilization had existed. Machines that no longer worked. Their purpose unknown. Someone had been here before. Someone had built cities and roads and monuments. And then they had vanished, leaving nothing behind but silence and stone. Who were they? Sarah asked as they walked through the ruins. Where did they go? Marcus shook his head. I don't know. But look at this architecture. Look at these designs. Whoever they were advanced. Much more advanced than us. More advanced than the Concorde. That question hung in the air. Marcus thought about it carefully before answering. Maybe. The Concorde has never mentioned anything like this. They talk about themselves as the first great civilizations, the oldest powers in the galaxy. But these ruins are older than anything they have shown us. Much older. They explored deeper into the ruined city. Most of what they found was broken or decayed beyond understanding. But in one building, buried beneath layers of dirt and debris, they discovered something intact. It was a door. A massive door made of metal that gleamed as if it had been polished yesterday. No rust, no damage, no signs of age. It looked like it had been built last week. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. Nothing stays preserved this long. Not without active maintenance. Marcus approached the door carefully. His instruments detected strange energy readings coming from behind it. Something was still working in there. Something was still powered after all this time. Should we try to open it? Sarah asked. Marcus thought about the risks. They had no idea what was behind that door. It could be dangerous. It could be nothing. It could be the greatest discovery in human history. He made his decision. Yes, open it. It took them 3 days to figure out how. The door had no handle, no visible mechanism, no obvious way to interact with it. Eventually, one of the engineers discovered that it responded to specific sound frequencies. A certain pattern of tones, played in the right order, caused the door to slide open with a soft hiss. Behind it was a chamber filled with light. Marcus had expected dust and darkness. Instead, he found a room that seemed alive with energy. Columns of soft blue light rose from floor to ceiling, walls covered with symbols that pulsed and shifted as he watched. And in the center of the room, floating in mid-air, was a sphere about the size of a human head. The sphere was made of crystal, or something that looked like crystal. Inside it, patterns of light moved and danced in complex formations. It was beautiful, hypnotic, almost alive. What is it? Sarah breathed. Marcus reached out toward the sphere. As his hand approached, the patterns inside it changed. They formed shapes that looked almost like words, though in no language he recognized. Then, suddenly, the sphere spoke, not in sound, in thought. Information flooded Marcus's mind. Concepts, images, memories that were not his own. He saw stars being born and dying. He saw civilizations rising from primitive beginnings to cosmic power. He saw wars fought across galaxies, peace treaties signed between species that no longer existed, technologies that bent the laws of physics, and he saw the ones who had built this place. They called themselves the Precursors. Or at least, that was the closest translation his mind could manage. They had ruled the galaxy long before the Concorde existed, long before any of the current species had evolved. They had built wonders that made Nexus Prime look like a child's toy. They had understood secrets of the universe that modern science had not even begun to approach. And then they had left. Not died. Not been destroyed. Simply left. Moved on to somewhere else. Some higher plane of existence or some other galaxy or some state of being that Marcus could not comprehend. But they had left things behind. Gifts for whoever came after. Knowledge stored in crystal spheres. Machines waiting to be activated. Maps to resources and treasures scattered across the outer rim. Marcus pulled his hand back from the sphere. He was shaking. Tears streamed down his face, though he did not know why. "Captain?" Sarah's voice seemed very far away. "Are you all right? What happened?" Marcus looked at her. Then he looked at the sphere. Then he started to laugh. "We need to send another message to Earth," he said. "Tell them we found something much better than a habitable planet. Tell them we found hope." The news spread across human space like wildfire. The precursor vault on Kepler 442b was just the first of many. As more expedition teams pushed into the outer rim, they found more ruins, more vaults, more gifts left behind by a civilization that had transcended millions of years ago. On a frozen moon orbiting a gas giant, miners discovered caverns filled with crystal data cores. Each core contained star maps, showing resource-rich systems that the Concorde had never charted. Metal deposits, rare elements, energy sources beyond anything known to current science. On an airless rock at the edge of a dying star system, scientists found a manufacturing facility that still worked. Feed it raw materials, and it produced components made of materials that should not exist. Alloys stronger than anything human or Concorde engineers could create. Conductors that moved energy with perfect efficiency. Metamaterials that bent light and gravity in impossible ways. On a world shrouded in perpetual storms, explorers discovered a library. Not books or screens or databases, but direct mental downloads. Centuries of accumulated knowledge poured into human minds in moments. Mathematics that solved problems Earth's greatest geniuses had struggled with for generations. Physics that explained phenomena the Concorde still called unexplainable. Biology that opened doors to medicines and modifications beyond imagination. Each discovery led to more discoveries. Each vault contained hints pointing to other vaults. The precursors had scattered their gifts across the outer rim like seeds, waiting for someone curious enough and desperate enough to find them. The Concorde had never looked. Why would they? They were already powerful. They were already ancient. They had everything they wanted. The thought of searching the empty darkness beyond their borders for treasures left by someone else had never occurred to them. But humanity had nothing. Humanity was desperate. And desperate people searched places that comfortable people ignored. Admiral Yuki Tanaka was one of the first to understand what this meant. She was 60 years old, a veteran of the early expedition fleets. She had spent most of her life in space, jumping from system to system, searching for a place where humanity could build a future. She had seen dozens of colonies rise, a few colonies fall, and countless acts of courage and sacrifice along the way. Now she stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Times Horizon Asterisk, and looked out at Bastion Station. 10 years ago, this had been empty space. Now it was the heart of human civilization in the outer rim, a massive habitat orbiting a captured gas giant, home to 3 million people and growing every month. Shipyards stretched out from its core, building vessels faster than humans had ever built them before. Research facilities hummed with activity as scientists worked to understand and replicate precursor technologies. "Admiral," her aide said, "the latest population report from Earth. They're sending another wave. 20 million colonists over the next 5 years. Yuki nodded. The exodus continued. It had started as a trickle after Alara Vance's speech. Then it had become a stream. Now it was a flood. People from every nation, every background, every walk of life, were volunteering to leave everything behind and start over in the outer rim. Some came for adventure. Some came for opportunity. Some came because they had nothing left to lose. But all of them came because they believed in the dream Alara had planted 50 years ago. The dream of proving the Council wrong. "Send them," Yuki said. "We have room. We have resources. We have work for everyone." She turned to look at the star map displayed on the bridge. Human territory was marked in blue. It had started as a single dot around Earth. Now it was a spreading stain across the outer rim, covering hundreds of star systems. Not all of those systems were developed. Most were still being surveyed or had small outposts. But the foundation was there. The infrastructure was growing. Every year, humanity became stronger, more established, more permanent. And the conquered still had not noticed. That surprised Yuki more than anything else. She had expected the ancient powers to react to humanity's expansion, to send observers, diplomats, maybe even threats. But there had been nothing. Complete silence from Nexus Prime. She had discussed this with the other admirals, the colony governors, the scientists. They had theories. The Concord was too arrogant to care what happened in the worthless Outer Rim. The Concord was too slow and bureaucratic to notice changes on the frontier. The Concord simply did not believe that humanity could build anything significant, so they did not bother to check. Whatever the reason, their blindness was a gift. Every year of peace was a year to grow stronger. Every year without interference was a year to establish deeper roots. The longer the Concord ignored them, the harder it would be to uproot them later. "We need to be ready," Yuki said to no one in particular. "They will come eventually. When they realize what we have built, they will not be happy." Her aide looked nervous. "Do you think they will attack?" Yuki considered the question carefully. "I think they will do what powerful beings always do when they feel threatened. They will try to control us, to limit us, to put us back in our place. Whether that means war or something else, I cannot say. But we must be ready for anything." She issued orders. The shipyards increased production. The research facilities prioritized military applications. Defense stations were constructed around key systems. A formal military structure was established, with training programs, command hierarchies, and contingency plans. They called it the Outer Guard. Its purpose was simple: protect humanity's new home from anyone who tried to take it away. Years passed. The Outer Guard grew from a small defense force to a serious military power. Human scientists cracked more precursor secrets, adapting ancient technologies to modern needs. Ships became faster, stronger, more capable. Weapons became more powerful. Shields became harder to penetrate. Yuki watched it all happen and felt a strange mixture of pride and fear. Pride in what humanity had accomplished. Fear of what might be coming. She was 75 years old when the first Concord scout ships appeared at the edge of human territory. They were small vessels, designed for observation rather than combat. They jumped in, scanned the area, and jumped out before anyone could intercept them. Classic reconnaissance tactics. Yuki knew what this meant. The Concord had finally noticed. They were gathering information, assessing the situation, preparing their response. She called an emergency meeting of the Terran Outer Rim Confederation, the governing body that had formed to coordinate human activities across the rim. Representatives from every major colony attended, either in person or via long-range communication. "They are watching us now," Yuki told them. "We have perhaps a few years, maybe less, before they decide what to do. We must use that time wisely." The debates that followed were intense. Some wanted to reach out, to try diplomacy, to show the Concord that humanity wanted peace. Others wanted to strike first, to hit the scout ships and show strength. Still others wanted to hide, to pull back to the most defensible systems and hope the Concord would lose interest. In the end, they chose a middle path. They would continue building, continue preparing, continue growing stronger. They would not provoke the Concord, but they would not show weakness either. If the ancient powers wanted peace, humanity would welcome it. If they wanted war, humanity would be ready. Yuki returned to Bastion Station and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Concord was making plans. Somewhere out there, the old powers were discussing what to do about the upstart species that had crawled out of the darkness and built something in their backyard. She thought about Alara Vance, the woman who had started all of this with a speech and a dream. Alara had died without knowing if humanity would succeed. She had planted a seed and trusted others to help it grow. "We're still growing, Alara," Yuki whispered to the stars. "We're still proving them wrong. I hope you can see it, wherever you are." In her hand, she held a small crystal sphere, a gift from the precursors, recovered from the first vault on Kepler 442b. It was a symbol now, passed from leader to leader, a reminder of where humanity had come from and where they were going. The sphere pulsed softly in her palm. Yuki liked to imagine it was the precursors approving of what humanity had done. Probably it was just random energy fluctuations, but sometimes, imagination was more important than facts. The Outer Rim was no longer empty. It was no longer worthless. It was home to 100 million human beings and growing. It was filled with cities and farms and factories and schools. It was alive with dreams and hopes and determination. The Concord had thrown humanity away. They had called them worthless, insignificant, doomed to fail. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. 120 years had passed since humanity was cast aside by the Galactic Council. 120 years since Alara Vance had pointed to the darkness beyond the Concorde's borders and said, "We will take everything they left behind." She would have been amazed by what her people had built. The Terran Outer Rim Confederation now stretched across 400 star systems. Some were fully developed worlds with cities and industries and populations in the billions. Others were frontier outposts, mining operations, research stations. Together, they formed a web of human civilization that spanned distances the early explorers could barely have imagined. Bastion Station, once a simple habitat in orbit around a gas giant, had grown into something magnificent. It was now a city habitat larger than most moons, home to 50 million people. Ships came and went constantly, carrying goods, passengers, and information to every corner of human space. It was the heart of the Confederation, the symbol of everything humanity had achieved. Chancellor Amara Okonkwo stood at the great window in her office, watching the endless stream of traffic. She was 63 years old, tall and strong, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen both the best and worst of what humanity could do. She had been chancellor for 8 years now, elected by the Confederate Assembly to lead their young civilization through whatever challenges lay ahead. Those challenges were about to become very real. "Chancellor," said her aide, stepping into the office. "The council meeting is about to begin. They're waiting for you." Amara nodded and turned away from the window. The Confederate Assembly was gathered in the Great Hall below, along with military commanders, scientists, and representatives from every major colony. They had come to discuss the most important question facing humanity: what to do about the Concorde. The scout ships had stopped appearing 2 years ago. At first, the military had hoped this meant the Concorde had lost interest, but intelligence reports told a different story. The ancient powers were not losing interest. They were gathering their forces. They were preparing something big. Amara walked into the Great Hall and took her place at the central podium. The room fell silent as she looked out at the assembled crowd. Thousands of faces looked back at her. Some worried, some determined, some afraid. They all wanted to know what she was going to say. They all wanted to know if they were safe. "Friends," Amara began, "we are here to discuss our future. Not just the next year, or the next decade, but the future of humanity itself. What I have to tell you is difficult, but you deserve to know the truth." She gestured, and a holographic display appeared behind her. It showed the latest intelligence data, gathered by stealth probes and intercepted communications. The Concorde has assembled a fleet at the edge of their territory. 800 warships, 30 million soldiers, weapons and technologies that we are still working to understand. This is the largest military force they have gathered in over 1,000 years. Murmurs spread through the crowd. 800 warships. The Confederation's entire fleet numbered less than 300. And many of those were converted cargo ships or hastily built patrol vessels. "We do not know exactly when they will move," Amara continued, "but we know where they are going. Here, to the Outer Rim, to us." She paused to let that sink in. "Some of you are wondering why. We have done nothing to threaten the Concorde. We have stayed in our own territory. We have not challenged their authority or interfered with their operations. Why would they come for us?" Amara looked around the room slowly. "Because we exist. Because we have built something without their permission. Because we have grown stronger than they expected. Because we have proven their judgment wrong. And powerful beings do not like being wrong." She pulled up another image. A recording of the council session from 120 years ago. Alara Vance, standing alone before the 14 ancient powers. The Velthari laughing. The Kethra calling humans meat that thinks. The archivists turning away in disinterest. They told us we were worthless. They told us to crawl back to our small planet and wait to die. But we did not crawl. We did not die. We spread across the stars they had abandoned. We found treasures they were too arrogant to seek. We built a civilization from nothing. Her voice grew stronger. And now they are afraid. Not of our weapons, though our weapons have grown strong. Not of our numbers, though our population has grown large. They are afraid of what we represent. The possibility that they were wrong. The possibility that their judgment is not perfect. The possibility that other species might follow our example and challenge their authority. She turned off the display and faced the crowd directly. "They are coming to crush us. To destroy everything we have built. to prove to themselves and to the galaxy that their original verdict was correct, that humanity really is worthless, that we really should have crawled back to Earth and died. Silence filled the hall. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Fleet Admiral Dmitry Volkov stood up from his seat in the front row. He was 70 years old. Born on a colony ship during the Great Exodus, his entire life had been shaped by humanity's struggle to survive in the Outer Rim. He had risen through the military ranks on talent and determination, becoming the commander of the Outer Guard 15 years ago. "Chancellor," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. "What are your orders?" Amara smiled slightly. She had known Dmitry for 20 years. He was not a complicated man. He saw problems and he wanted to solve them. If the Concord was coming, he wanted to fight. That was his nature. "Admiral Volkov," she said, "the floor is yours. Tell us what we face." Dmitry walked to the podium and activated his own displays. Technical data, ship specifications, tactical analyses. He went through them methodically, explaining the Concord's strengths and weaknesses, their likely strategies, their probable targets. "Their fleet is larger than ours," he admitted. "Their individual ships are, in most cases, more powerful than ours. Their crews have more experience, more training, more resources. On paper, they should destroy us easily." He paused and let the silence stretch. "But we have advantages they do not expect. First, we have precursor technology. Our ships may be smaller, but our weapons are now at least equal to theirs, and in some cases, superior. Our shields use principles they do not understand. Our engines can do things their engineers believe are impossible." He pulled up more data. "Second, we know this territory. The Outer Rim is our home. We know every system, every asteroid field, every navigational hazard. They will be fighting in unfamiliar space while we fight in our own backyard. Third, and most important, we have something they lost long ago. Desperation, hunger, the will to survive at any cost. They are coming here expecting a quick victory over inferior beings. They expect us to break and run. They expect us to surrender when we see their power." His eyes swept across the crowd. "We will not break. We will not run. We will not surrender. We will show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." The crowd erupted in cheers. Dmitry let them express their feelings for a moment before raising his hand for silence. "But we must be realistic. Courage alone will not win this war. We need every ship, every weapon, every able body we can muster. We need civilians willing to support the war effort, to work in factories and shipyards, to maintain supply lines and provide resources. We need scientists to continue unlocking precursor secrets. We need everyone to do their part." He looked at Amara. "Chancellor, I believe we can win this war, but it will be the hardest thing humanity has ever done. We will lose ships. We will lose people. We will lose colonies. Before this is over, some of the faces in this room will be gone forever. That is the price of survival." Amara nodded slowly. She had known this was coming. She had hoped it would not, but she had known. "Admiral Volkov speaks the truth," she said. "This will be difficult. Perhaps the most difficult thing our species has ever faced. But we have faced difficult things before. Ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters. We have survived everything the universe has thrown at us for hundreds of thousands of years. We will survive this too." She raised her voice so that everyone could hear. "I am not going to promise you victory. No one can promise that. But I will promise you this. We will fight. We will resist. We will make them pay for every system they try to take, every station they try to destroy, every life they try to end. And whether we win or lose, history will remember that when the ancient powers came to crush us, humanity did not bow. Humanity stood tall. Humanity fought back. The vote that followed was unanimous. The Confederation would resist. The Outer Guard would defend their territory. Every resource would be devoted to the war effort. As the meeting ended and people began to file out, Amara found herself standing alone with Dmitry. "Do you really believe we can win?" she asked quietly. Dmitry was silent for a long moment. "I believe we have a chance," he finally said. "A small chance, perhaps, but better than the chance the Council gave us when they threw us out. Better than the chance we had when we first came to the Outer Rim with nothing but old ships and desperate hopes." He looked at her with those hard, determined eyes. "And honestly, Chancellor, it doesn't matter if I believe. The Concorde is coming whether we believe or not. We can either fight, or we can die on our knees. I would rather die fighting. Amara nodded. So would I. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Shipyards worked around the clock. Factories produced weapons and supplies at maximum capacity. Civilian volunteers trained for military duty. Scientists pushed their research to the limits, trying to unlock any advantage that might help in the coming battle. And in secret, the Prometheus project moved forward. Amara knew about it, of course. As Chancellor, she had access to all classified information. The Prometheus project was the most classified of all. It was humanity's last resort. Their final card. The weapon they hoped they would never have to use. Precursor technology had given humanity many gifts. Better engines, stronger shields, more powerful weapons. But one discovery had been kept hidden from everyone except a handful of scientists and military commanders. A method of generating localized space-time distortions. Miniature black holes, controlled and directed, capable of crushing anything within their range. The physics involved were terrifying. The potential for disaster was enormous. A single mistake could destroy not just a ship but an entire star system. But if used correctly, it could turn the tide of any battle. One destroyer had been modified to carry a Prometheus core. Its name was the Times Defiance Asterisk. Its crew knew they might be asked to make the ultimate sacrifice. They had volunteered anyway. Amara hoped she would never have to give that order. She hoped the regular fleet could win the battle on its own. She hoped the Concorde would see humanity's strength and decide negotiation was better than war. But she was prepared to use every weapon at her disposal if that was what survival required. The fleet gathered at Threshold, a system at the edge of Confederation space. It was the most likely point of attack. Based on the intelligence they had gathered, if the Concorde wanted to strike at humanity's heart, they would have to come through here. 300 human ships waited. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, battleships. Many were new, built in the rush of preparation over the past months. Others were veterans, ships that had served the Confederation for decades. All of them were ready to fight. Admiral Volkov stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Times Indomitable Asterisk. Around him, officers and crew worked with quiet efficiency, making final preparations. Sensor teams watched for any sign of the enemy. Weapons teams ran diagnostics on every gun and missile. Engine teams ensured they could move and maneuver at a moment's notice. "How long do you think we have?" asked Captain Liu, Volkov's second in command. Volkov checked the latest reports. Hours, maybe less. Their advanced scouts were spotted 2 systems away this morning. The main fleet won't be far behind. Liu nodded. She was younger than Volkov, in her 40s, with a sharp mind and steady nerves. She had earned her position through years of service and proved herself in a dozen skirmishes with pirates and raiders. "The crews are ready," she said. "Morale is high. Whatever happens, we'll give them a fight they won't forget." Volkov allowed himself a small smile. "That's all I ask. Make them remember us. Make them respect us. Even if we lose, make sure they know they were in a war, not a slaughter." The waiting continued. Hours passed. Tension built like pressure in a sealed container. Every minute felt like an eternity. Then the alarms began to sound. "Contact!" shouted the sensor officer. Multiple signatures coming out of jump space. Bearing 047 Mark III. Range 70,000 kilometers and closing. The main display lit up with enemy icons. Red dots appearing one after another, filling the screen like drops of blood spreading through water. 100 ships. 200. 300. 400. 500. The counting continued until the number reached 812. The entire Concorde expeditionary fleet, arrayed against them in perfect formation. Volkov studied the enemy formation calmly. He had expected this. He had prepared for this. Fear was a luxury he could not afford. "All ships, battle stations," he ordered. "Form defensive pattern Sigma 7. Hold position until my command." The human fleet responded instantly. Ships moving into a tight defensive formation. They were outnumbered almost 3-1. They would not win a straight fight. They would have to be smarter than that. On the bridge of the Times Eternal Radiance Asterisk, Grand Admiral Zeth Voran of the Velthari surveyed the human fleet with contempt. Such small ships, such primitive formations. This would be over quickly. "Interesting," he said to his aide. "They have more vessels than our reports indicated." They have been busy. Yes, Grand Admiral. But their technology is still inferior. Their crews lack experience. This will not be a challenge. Szeth Voran was a being of pure light, ancient even by Velthari standards. He had commanded fleets before humanity's ancestors had discovered fire. He had conquered species that history had forgotten. He expected this to be another simple victory in a long career of simple victories. Still, he said thoughtfully, I am curious. They were told to stay in their single system. They were told they had no place among the stars. Yet here they are, defying us. It takes a certain kind of arrogance to challenge the council, or stupidity, his aide suggested. Perhaps, we shall see. He gave the order to advance. Across the void, two forces moved toward each other. 800 against 300. Ancient power against young defiance. The fate of humanity would be decided in the hours to come. Admiral Volkov watched the enemy approach and felt something he had not expected. Not fear. Not despair. Anticipation. All ships, he said, his voice calm and clear. This is Admiral Volkov. You know why we're here. You know what we're fighting for. Our homes. Our families. Our right to exist. The Concord thinks we're nothing. They think we'll break and run at the first shot. They think this will be easy. He paused. Let's prove them wrong. The first shots were fired at exactly 1437 Confederation Standard Time. History would remember that moment forever. Grand Admiral Szeth Voran had ordered his fleet to advance in a broad formation, expecting the humans to either retreat or be overwhelmed quickly. His ships moved with the confidence of predators approaching prey, energy weapons charged, shields powered up. 800 vessels spread across the void like a net closing around a small fish. Admiral Volkov watched them come. He had studied the Concord's tactics. He knew their patterns, their preferences, their weaknesses. They liked to overwhelm enemies with superior numbers. They liked to crush resistance quickly and move on. They were not used to prey that fought back. All ships, execute maneuver Alpha 3, he ordered. Let them think we're retreating. The human fleet began to fall back, moving toward the asteroid field behind them. The Concord fleet accelerated to pursue. Just as Volkov had predicted, they're taking the bait, Captain Liu observed. Their formation is spreading as they try to cut off our retreat. Volkov nodded. The Concord had thousands of years of victory behind them. They had never learned to be cautious. They had never needed to. Wait for it, he said. Wait until they're fully committed. The Concord ships pushed into the asteroid field, following the retreating humans. Their sensors were good, but the dense rock formations scattered their readings, made it harder to track individual ships, exactly as planned. Now, Volkov said, execute Omega Protocol. All ships, attack. The human fleet stopped retreating and turned to fight. But they did not attack head-on. Instead, they scattered, breaking into small groups of 3 or 4 ships each. Each group targeted a different section of the enemy formation. On the Time's Eternal Radiance asterisk, Szeth Voran watched the human ships disappear from his tactical display as they dove into the asteroid field. What are they doing? He demanded. They can't hide from us. Find them. His sensor operators worked frantically, trying to track the fast-moving human vessels. But the asteroids provided cover, and the humans were using every advantage they could find. The first attack came from nowhere. Commodore Jin Reyes commanded the Times Constellation Times battle group. 4 ships working together in perfect coordination. They emerged from behind a massive asteroid and opened fire on a Velthari cruiser before it could react. But their weapons did not have the expected effect. The Velthari shields absorbed the energy blasts, glowing brightly but remaining intact. Switch to kinetic, Reyes ordered immediately. Alpha pattern. The Concord had developed their shields over thousands of years. They were perfectly designed to absorb and dissipate energy weapons, but they were not designed for what came next. The human ships launched projectiles, simple tungsten rods, accelerated to a fraction of light speed by magnetic rails. No fancy energy, no complex technology, just mass and velocity, the oldest weapon in the universe. The rods hit the Velthari cruiser like hammers hitting glass. The shields, designed for energy dissipation, could not handle the pure kinetic force. They collapsed. The rods punched through the hull, tearing the ship apart from within. The Velthari cruiser exploded. Across the battle, similar scenes played out. Human ships emerged from cover, struck with kinetic weapons, and disappeared again before the Concorde could respond. The ancient warships, designed for a type of warfare that had not changed in millennia, were unprepared for enemies who fought differently. Szeth Voran watched in disbelief as his fleet began to take losses. "Impossible," he whispered. "Their weapons should not be able to penetrate our shields. They're using kinetic impacts." "Grand Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "our shields are calibrated for energy absorption. The physical projectiles are bypassing our defenses. Then recalibrate," Szeth Voran shouted. "Adjust the shield frequencies. It takes time, Grand Admiral. Our systems are not designed for rapid changes. The protocols require—" "I don't care about protocols. We are losing ships." It was true. In the first hour of battle, the Concorde lost 23 vessels. The humans lost only 5. The exchange rate was absurdly lopsided, impossible by any historical standard. But the Concorde had numbers. They could afford losses that would cripple the human fleet. Szeth Voran knew this. He just had to be patient and let mathematics do its work. "All ships, form defensive clusters," he ordered. "Concentrate fire on any human vessel that reveals itself. They cannot hide forever." The battle shifted. The Concorde stopped advancing and pulled into tight defensive formations. Human hit-and-run attacks became more dangerous as the enemy learned to watch for them. The exchange rate began to balance. Admiral Volkov saw this happening and adjusted his strategy. "Deploy the architects," he ordered. The architect drones were one of humanity's secret weapons. Artificial intelligences far beyond anything the Confederation had built before the precursor discoveries. They were not just weapons. They were learning systems, capable of analyzing enemy patterns and adapting in real time. Thousands of small drones launched from human carriers. Each one was intelligent, coordinated with its fellows, and absolutely relentless. The Kethra swarm had brought fighter craft to the battle. Millions of small ships crewed by insectoid pilots, swarming around the larger vessels like angry bees. They were fast, maneuverable, and deadly in large numbers. The architects met them in the void. At first, the Kethra had the advantage. They had been fighting as swarms for millions of years. Their coordination was instinctive, bred into their very genes. They overwhelmed the architects through sheer numbers. But the architects learned. Every engagement taught them something new. Every destroyed drone sent data back to its fellows. Within minutes, the architects began predicting Kethra attack patterns. Within an hour, they were anticipating movements before they happened. Kethra fighters began dying in waves. They would swoop in for an attack, and the architects would already be there, waiting, firing before the Kethra even knew they were targeted. The swarm leader screamed in frustration through his command channel. "They are learning too fast. Our patterns are useless. Every attack fails. Change your patterns," Szeth Voran ordered. "We are trying, but they adapt faster than we can change. It is like fighting an enemy that knows our thoughts." On the bridge of the Time's indomitable asterisk, Volkov allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The architects were performing beyond expectations. The battle was not won, but it was no longer the certain defeat everyone had predicted. "Admiral," Captain Liu said urgently. "New contact. A large ship is emerging from the Concorde formation." "Very large." Volkov looked at the display. A massive vessel, easily 10 times the size of his flagship, was moving toward the human lines. Its shape was unfamiliar, covered with strange protrusions and glowing nodes. "What is that?" "Unknown, sir. We have no records of anything like it. Sensors show enormous power readings. Whatever it is, it's not a normal warship." The massive ship stopped at the edge of the asteroid field. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the glowing nodes began to pulse with increasing intensity. "Energy spike," Liu shouted. "Something is." The ship fired. A beam of pure white light lanced across the void. It struck an asteroid the size of a small moon and vaporized it instantly. Then it swept sideways, cutting through 3 human cruisers that were hidden behind the asteroid. They did not explode. They simply ceased to exist, converted to expanding clouds of superheated gas. Volkov stared in horror. In a single shot, the enemy had killed more humans than the rest of the battle combined. "All ships, disperse," he ordered. "Get away from that weapon's firing arc. Move." The human fleet scattered. The massive ship fired again, and again, each beam annihilating anything it touched. Asteroids, Ships, defense platforms. Nothing could withstand its power. What do we do? Liu asked, her voice shaking for the first time. Our weapons can't touch something that size. It will destroy us all. Volkov's mind raced through options. Conventional attacks were useless. The ship's shields would be proportionally stronger than anything they had faced. Even kinetic weapons would not work against something that massive. There was only one choice. Signal the time's defiance asterisk, he said quietly. Tell them it's time. Liu's face went pale. She knew what that meant. Everyone in the command structure knew what that meant. Sir, are you sure? We have no choice. If we don't stop that ship, everyone dies. The time's defiance times is our only option. The time's defiance times was a destroyer, small and fast. It had been modified in secret to carry the Prometheus core, only 50 crew members, all volunteers, all knowing that they might not survive their mission. Captain Sarah Park commanded the time's defiance asterisk. She was the same Sarah Park who had served with Marcus Chen on the Times Endeavour times so many years ago, when humanity first discovered the precursor vaults. She was older now, gray-haired and worn, but still sharp and determined. When the signal came, she did not hesitate. All hands, she announced over the ship's intercom. This is the captain. We have received orders to activate the Prometheus protocol. You all know what this means. We knew this day might come when we volunteered. Now it has. She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. Many were young. Some were barely out of training. All of them looked afraid, but none of them looked away. I will not give pretty speeches about glory or sacrifice. What we are about to do is simple. We are going to save our people, our families, our future. That is worth everything we have to give. She turned to her helm officer. Take us in. Maximum speed. Straight at the target. The time's defiance times shot forward. Engines pushed beyond their design limits. The massive Concorde ship saw it coming and fired its terrible beam. But the time's defiance times was small and fast, jinking and weaving through the void like a leaf in a hurricane. Other Concorde ships tried to intercept, but the architects swarmed them, buying precious seconds. Human cruisers charged in suicide runs, drawing fire away from the destroyer. Everyone understood what was happening. Everyone did their part. On the bridge of the Time's Eternal Radiance asterisk, Zeth Voran watched the small ship approaching. What is that vessel doing? He demanded. Why is it charging directly at the Annihilator? Unknown, Grand Admiral. Perhaps a suicide attack. Primitive species sometimes resort to such tactics. Let it come, then. One small ship cannot harm the Annihilator. The Time's defiance times reached the point of no return. It was inside the massive ship's shield bubble now, too close for the main weapon to target. Park smiled grimly. Activate the Prometheus core. Deep within the destroyer, ancient technology awakened. The precursors had understood things about space-time that modern science was only beginning to grasp. They had learned to bend reality itself, to create distortions in the fabric of existence. The Prometheus core created a singularity, a tiny black hole, smaller than an atom but infinitely dense. It appeared between the Time's defiance times and the massive Concorde ship, exactly where the calculations had predicted. For one heartbeat, nothing visible happened. Then gravity took over. The singularity pulled at everything around it. The Time's defiance times was caught, its hull crumpling like paper. Captain Park and her crew died instantly, crushed by forces beyond imagination. But they did not die alone. The massive Concorde ship was pulled toward the singularity. Its shields were useless against gravity. Its mighty hull bent and twisted, metal screaming as it was stretched and compressed. The ship that had seemed unstoppable, that had vaporized asteroids and annihilated cruisers, was dragged toward a point of infinite density. 47 other Concorde ships were caught in the effect. They too were pulled in, crushed, compressed, destroyed. Grand Admiral Xeth Voran's flagship, the Time's Eternal Radiance asterisk, was among them. In his final moments, Zeth Voran understood what had happened. These humans, these primitive beings he had dismissed as worthless, had mastered a technology the Concorde had never imagined. They had turned the fundamental forces of the universe into a weapon. His last thought, before the singularity tore him apart, was a single word: impossible. The singularity collapsed after 7 seconds, exactly as designed. It left behind nothing but a sphere of compressed matter, the size of a marble, containing the remains of 48 warships and one brave destroyer. The Battle of Threshold Gate paused. Both sides stared at the place where the singularity had been. The Concord fleet was in shock. Their greatest weapon, their invincible Grand Admiral, nearly 50 of their finest ships, all gone in an instant. Admiral Volkov recovered first. "All ships," he ordered, his voice hard as steel. "Attack. Now. While they're confused. Give them everything we have." The human fleet surged forward. Ships that had been hiding, conserving strength, now threw themselves at the stunned enemy. Kinetic rounds hammered conquered shields. Architect drones swarmed through gaps in defensive formations. Human crews, inspired by the sacrifice of the Times Defiance asterisk, fought with desperate fury. The Concord fleet broke. It did not happen all at once. First, one ship turned and ran, then another, then a dozen, then 100. The ancient discipline that had held them together for millennia crumbled in the face of something they had never experienced: fear. Within 3 hours, the Concord Expeditionary Fleet was in full retreat. They left behind 216 destroyed ships, countless dead crew members, and the shattered remains of their reputation. The greatest military force in the known galaxy had been defeated by a species they had called worthless. Admiral Volkov stood on the bridge of the Times' indomitable Times and watched them flee. He felt no joy. Too many of his own people had died for joy. The Times, Defiance Times and her crew, dozens of other ships, thousands of lives, but they had won. "Send a message to Bastion Station," he said quietly. "Tell the Chancellor, the battle is over. We are still here." On Bastion Station, Chancellor Amara Okonkwo received the news with tears in her eyes. She had watched the battle through real-time transmissions, seen the impossible victory unfold, seen the sacrifice of the Times Defiance asterisk. She had never felt more proud or more sad in her life. Around her, people were celebrating. News of the victory was spreading across human space, and everywhere, people were shouting, crying, embracing. They had faced extinction and survived. They had proven themselves against the greatest power in the galaxy. But Amara knew the truth. This was not the end. It was barely the beginning. The Concord would not accept this defeat. They would regroup, reconsider, return. The war was not over. It would continue for years, perhaps decades. More battles would be fought. More lives would be lost. The road ahead was long and hard, but for this moment, this one precious moment, humanity had won. She walked to her office window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the retreating Concord fleet was licking its wounds, trying to understand what had happened. Somewhere out there, the other species of the galaxy were hearing the news and wondering what it meant. A species the Council had dismissed as worthless had just defeated the mightiest fleet ever assembled. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Amara reached into her pocket and pulled out a small crystal sphere, the same one Admiral Tanaka had carried, passed down from leader to leader. A gift from the precursors, a symbol of how far humanity had come. "We did it, Alara," she whispered to the ghost of the woman who had started it all. "We proved them wrong. We showed them what we are." The sphere pulsed softly in her hand, its patterns shifting and flowing like thoughts in crystal form. Whatever came next, humanity would face it together. They had earned their place among the stars, and no one would ever take it away. The galaxy held its breath for 3 months after the Battle of Threshold Gate. News of the Concord's defeat spread like fire through dry grass. Every species, every world, every sentient being learned what had happened. The humans, those primitive creatures the Council had dismissed as worthless, had crushed the mightiest fleet ever assembled. Grand Admiral Zeth Voran, the legendary Velthari commander who had never known defeat, was dead. 200 warships were destroyed. The rest had fled in terror. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Concord looked weak. On Nexus Prime, the Council met in emergency session. The 14 ancient powers gathered in the same crystalline chamber where they had once rejected humanity, and they argued about what to do next. The Kethra demanded immediate revenge. "We must destroy them, send every ship we have, burn their colonies to ash, show the galaxy that challenging the Concord means death." The Dramath counseled caution. "We underestimated them once. Another hasty attack could fail again. We need time to study their weapons, understand their tactics." The archivists, as always, observed and recorded. offering little opinion. The mycelians raised a possibility none wanted to consider. Perhaps we should negotiate. They have proven their strength. Continued war benefits no one. The suggestion was met with outrage. Negotiate? With humans? The species they had called pests? It was unthinkable. But the practical reality could not be ignored. The Concord had other concerns besides humanity. There were always threats on the borders, always internal tensions to manage, always resources to protect. Devoting everything to crushing one species in the outer rim would leave them vulnerable elsewhere. And there was the weapon to consider. The singularity technology. No one in the Concord understood how the humans had developed it. If they could use it once, they could use it again. Any fleet sent against them might suffer the same fate as Xeth Vorans. The debate continued for weeks. Meanwhile, the humans did something unexpected. They did not attack. Chancellor Okonkwo had the power to order a counteroffensive. The Concord was reeling, confused, afraid. A strike now could push deep into their territory, capture systems, force concessions. Admiral Volkov and much of the military urged exactly this strategy. But Amara remembered something. She remembered Ilara Vance's final words, spoken on her deathbed decades ago. Don't become them. Whatever you do, don't become what they tried to make us. The Council had ruled through fear and force for 12,000 years. They had conquered, dominated, crushed any species that challenged them. Their empire was built on the bones of countless civilizations that had dared to resist. Humanity could follow the same path. They could use their victory to launch a war of conquest. They could become the new dominant power, replacing one empire with another. The temptation was strong. Amara rejected it. She called a special session of the Confederate Assembly. The Great Hall on Bastion Station was packed with representatives, military commanders, and citizens. Everyone wanted to know what would happen next. Everyone wanted to know if there would be more war. Amara stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. She saw fear in some faces, anger in others, hope in a few. They were all waiting for her to tell them what to do. We won a great victory, she began. We proved that humanity cannot be ignored, cannot be dismissed, cannot be destroyed easily. We earned respect through blood and sacrifice. The galaxy knows our name now. She paused. But victory is not the end. It is a beginning. We must now decide what kind of civilization we want to be, what kind of future we want to build, what legacy we want to leave for our children and grandchildren. She looked at Admiral Volkov, sitting in the front row. Many have urged me to order a counterattack, to strike at the Concord while they are weak, to conquer their systems, take their resources, establish humanity as the new dominant power in the galaxy. Volkov nodded slightly. He had made this argument himself, many times. I understand the appeal of this strategy. The Concord treated us with contempt. They threw us out, called us worthless, tried to destroy us. They deserve to suffer for what they did. Revenge would be satisfying. Amara shook her head. But revenge is not justice. Conquest is not strength. Becoming the thing we fought against is not victory. It is the worst kind of defeat. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked angry or confused. I did not fight this war to replace one empire with another. I did not watch my friends die so that humanity could rule the galaxy through fear. We are better than that. We must be better than that. She raised her voice. Ilara Vance started us on this path 120 years ago. She turned rejection into motivation, humiliation into fuel. But she did not want us to become conquerors. She wanted us to become something new, something the galaxy had never seen. A species that earned its place through excellence, not through domination. She activated the display behind her, showing a document she had spent weeks preparing. I am proposing that we send a message to the Galactic Council. Not a demand, not a threat, an invitation. The document appeared on the screen. It was short and simple. To the Galactic Council. We do not seek vengeance. We do not seek dominion. We seek what we asked for 170 years ago. A seat at the table. Not as supplicants, as equals. The outer rim is ours. We will defend it unto extinction, but we have no desire for your worlds. Come, let us speak as civilizations should, not as masters and servants, but as neighbors in an infinite cosmos. The hall erupted in chaos. People shouted, argued, debated. Some thought the proposal was wise and generous. Others thought it was weak and foolish. The argument continued for hours. In the end, they voted. It was close. Closer than Amara had hoped. But the proposal passed. The message would be sent. 3 days later, a small diplomatic ship left Bastion Station carrying humanity's offer of peace. On Nexus Prime, the Council received the message with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. They had expected demands, threats, ultimatums. Instead, they received an invitation to negotiate. It was so unexpected that some suspected a trick. Perhaps the humans were buying time to prepare another attack. Perhaps they were secretly planning something terrible. No species the Concord had defeated had ever responded with an offer of peace. But some on the Council saw an opportunity. The war had been expensive. More fighting would be even more expensive. If the humans were willing to negotiate, perhaps a settlement could be reached that served everyone's interests. The debate continued for months. Meanwhile, the military situation remained frozen. Neither side attacked. Both sides watched and waited. Finally, the Council sent their reply. They agreed to negotiations. A meeting would be held at a neutral location, a space station in the disputed territory between human and Concord space. Representatives from both sides would attend. The Threshold Conference, as it came to be known, lasted for 6 months. Negotiators argued over every point, every word, every detail. There were moments when talks nearly collapsed, when old grievances threatened to destroy any chance of agreement. Chancellor Okonkwo led the human delegation herself. She faced representatives from all 14 council species, beings who had ruled the galaxy since before humans had invented writing. They looked down at her with the same contempt they had shown Alara Vance so long ago. But now there was something else in their eyes. Fear, respect, uncertainty. Amara used every skill she had. She was patient when patience was needed, firm when firmness was required. She made concessions on minor points to win victories on major ones. She never let anger or pride cloud her judgment. Slowly, painfully, an agreement took shape. The Treaty of Threshold recognized humanity's right to the Outer Rim. The Concord would not interfere with human territory or development. In exchange, humanity agreed not to expand into Concord space or support rebellions against their authority. Trade agreements were established. Diplomatic relations were formalized. A system was created for resolving future disputes without war. And most importantly, humanity received a seat on the Galactic Council itself, not as a junior member, not as an observer, as a full participant with equal voice and equal vote. The Concord of 14 became the new Concord of 15. The signing ceremony was held on Nexus Prime, in the same crystalline chamber where Alara Vance had been rejected 170 years earlier. Chancellor Okonkwo stood at the same central stage, surrounded by the same floating platforms, facing representatives of the same ancient species. But everything was different now. She signed the treaty with a stylus that had belonged to Alara Vance, passed down through generations of human leaders. When she finished, she looked up at the council members and spoke. 170 years ago, a woman stood where I stand now. She asked for a chance to prove humanity's worth. You refused her. You called us worthless, insignificant, doomed to fail. She let the words hang in the air. She did not argue. She did not beg. She went home and told her people to prove you wrong. And they did. We did. Not through conquest or revenge, but through determination, creativity, and refusal to accept your verdict. She gestured at the treaty. This document is not a surrender. It is not a victory. It is a recognition of reality. We exist. We are strong. We are here to stay. You can either work with us or against us, but you cannot ignore us anymore. She looked directly at the Velthari representative, the successor to the being who had laughed at Alara Vance. You called us pests. You said we should be grateful you didn't manage us like vermin. Today, we sign a treaty as equals. I hope you understand what that means. It means your judgment was wrong. It means your arrogance blinded you. It means the galaxy is bigger and more complex than you ever imagined. The Velthari said nothing. There was nothing to say. When the ceremony ended, Amara returned to human space as a hero. Celebrations erupted across the Confederation. People who had lived their entire lives under the shadow of Concord contempt finally felt free. They had been recognized. They had been accepted. They belonged. But Amara knew the work was not done. Treaties were only as good as the will to maintain them. The Concord had agreed to peace because they had to, not because they wanted to. There would be challenges ahead, tensions, conflicts. The old species would test humanity's resolve, probe for weaknesses, look for opportunities to reassert their dominance. And some humans would want to test the Concord as well. Volkov and his faction still believed in strength, in expansion, in showing the galaxy that humanity was the rising power. They would push for more aggressive policies, greater military spending, bolder actions on the galactic stage. Amara would have to balance all of these forces, keep the peace, guide humanity through its new role. It would not be easy. 1 year after the Treaty of Threshold, a monument was unveiled on Bastion Station. It stood in the central plaza, visible from anywhere on the habitat. A statue of Ilara Vance, carved from asteroid stone, her hand outstretched in offering. The inscription at the base read, "They cast us aside. We built an empire. Then we offered them our hand. This is what it means to be human." Amara attended the dedication ceremony. So did Admiral Volkov, and representatives from every major human world. Thousands of people gathered to witness the moment. When the covering fell away and the statue was revealed, the crowd fell silent. Ilara Vance looked down at them with the same determined expression she had worn in life. Her outstretched hand seemed to reach across time, connecting the past to the present. Amara spoke briefly. Ilara Vance never saw what we became. She died wondering if humanity would succeed or fail. But everything we have, everything we are, started with her. With her refusal to accept defeat, with her vision of what we could become. We owe her more than we can ever repay. She looked up at the statue. But I think the best way to honor her memory is not through statues or ceremonies. It is through our choices. Every day, every moment, we decide what kind of species we will be. Do we choose fear or courage, revenge or mercy, domination or cooperation? Those choices define us more than any military victory or diplomatic treaty. She turned to face the crowd. We have power now. Real power. The kind of power the Concord has held for thousands of years. What we do with that power will determine our legacy. Will we be remembered as conquerors who replaced one empire with another? Or will we be remembered as something new? Something better? A species that earned its place through excellence and then used its strength to lift others up? She smiled. I know what Ilara would have chosen, and I know what we should choose. Not because it is easy, but because it is right. Because we are better than our pain. Because mercy is not weakness. Because true strength is measured not by what you take, but by what you give. After the ceremony, Amara found herself alone with Admiral Volkov. They stood at the observation window, looking out at the stars. The same stars humanity had once been forbidden to reach. You know this isn't over, Volkov said quietly. The Concord will test us. They'll scheme, manipulate, try to tear us apart from within. They haven't accepted us. They're just biding their time. Amara nodded. I know, and some of our own people will cause problems. There are factions who want war, who think we should have crushed the Concord when we had the chance. They won't be satisfied with treaties and diplomacy. I know that too. Volkov turned to look at her. And we'll be ready? Amara met his gaze. For a moment, Volkov saw something in her eyes that reminded him of the stories about Ilara Vance. The same cold fire, the same absolute determination. Dmitri, she said softly. We've always been ready. That's what they never understood about us. Humanity doesn't wait to be ready. We become ready. We adapt. We overcome. We endure. She turned back to the window, to the infinite expanse of stars. They thought our youth was a weakness. They were wrong. Youth means we haven't learned to accept limits yet. We haven't learned what's supposed to be impossible. We dream bigger, reach farther, try harder than species who have been around for millions of years. They thought our aggression was a flaw. They were wrong about that too. Aggression, properly directed, becomes determination. It becomes the refusal to quit. It becomes the will to fight for what matters. They thought our fragility made us inferior. But fragility teaches you to value every moment, to make every day count, to build things that will last beyond your own short life. She smiled again, but this time there was warmth in it. Everything they hated about us, everything they used to justify their contempt, those are our greatest strengths. We just needed the chance to prove it. Now we have. Volkov was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I never thought about it that way. I always just wanted to fight, to prove we were strong. I never considered that winning could mean something more than defeating our enemies. It does, Amara said. It means becoming the best version of ourselves. Not the version that conquers and dominates, but the version that creates and inspires. That's the victory Alara wanted. That's the victory that will last. Outside the window, ships moved through the void. Human ships, carrying goods and passengers to every corner of the outer rim. Trading vessels heading for Concord space, opening new markets, new relationships. Exploration ships pushing into the unknown, searching for more precursor secrets, more wonders waiting to be discovered. Humanity had seized the outer rim. They had proven the Council wrong. They had earned their place among the stars, but the journey was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, struggles, setbacks. The galaxy was vast and complicated, full of dangers and opportunities. Nothing was certain, yet looking out at those stars, Amara felt something she had not felt in years. Hope, not because the future was guaranteed to be good, not because all problems were solved, but because humanity had shown what it could do when pushed to the edge. They had turned rejection into triumph, contempt into respect, nothing into something magnificent. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They would adapt, overcome, endure. They would continue to prove that the Council's judgment had been the greatest mistake in galactic history, because that was what it meant to be human. Not to be perfect, not to be the strongest or the oldest or the wisest, just to never, ever give up. The stars waited, full of infinite possibilities, and humanity was ready to meet them.